with a mission to deliver fiscally responsible, highly dependable services to the citizens of our community and the region with integrity and professionalism. This is the City of Albany Commission meeting with Mayor Bo Duro, Mayor Pro Tem John Howard, Ward 1, Matt Fuller, Ward 2, BJ Fletcher, Ward 3, Chad Warbington, Ward 4, Bob Langstaff Jr., Ward 5, Demetrius Young, Ward 6, City Manager Sharon Subadale, City Clerk Sonia Talbot, and City Attorney Nathan Davis. This is the City of Albany Commission meeting.
Good morning. Welcome to the April 6, 2021 work session of the Albany City Commission. Ms. Talbot, could we call the roll?
Ward 1.
Here.
Ward 2.
Here.
Ward 3. Ward 3. Ward 4.
Ward 4 is here.
Ward 5.
Here.
Ward 6.
Here.
Mayor.
Mayor's here. We have two citizens who have signed up to speak this morning. The first is Miss April Andrews. Miss Andrews would like to address the commission on the issue of housing in Albany. Are you with us?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning to you as well.
Miss Andrews, could we give you, we allocate 5 minutes. Would that be sufficient?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And please could someone let me know when I'm up to a minute?
I will. Thank you, ma'am. You have the floor.
All right, well, good morning to all. My name is April Andrews, and I live here at Treetop Park Apartment, which is owned by Strategic Management Partners in Atlanta. It owns several different properties here in Dougherty County and in Alabama and up in Atlanta in northern Georgia. I just want to tell you a little bit about my housing issues and some of the problems that I'm having in regards to that. In big part, how code enforcement comes to our aid in regards to some of the complaints that we're having over at Treeside Park Apartments. If you would go to the slide that shows some of the multiple issues, I believe it is slide 3. In this, first of all, when we were first brought into this apartment complex, when the lady, building property manager came in and brought us in the night and day. Blinds were closed, everything was clean, and then day one, we moved in here, it's infested with roaches. Then maybe about a couple months later, about April, by around the time the shutdown comes up, we're infested with water. So from April, which by the way is handicapped and has multiple sclerosis and is bedbound. We have to get her up every morning. I have to check her every so often during the night. And I step into water. Now, these incidents happened between April and June. We thought were isolated. We were told that the plumbing, somebody is doing something they didn't have any business doing, and all the rest of those things, so we left it alone. Because once again, we're trusting that business as they should. If you could move to slide where it has the multiple issues, I believe that is slide 3. Amongst those multiple issues, backed up toilet, sewage in our tub, feces and matter floating around the tub, roaches, black mold in some of the apartments. To be strictly honest, I kind of feel like I'm dealing with complaining myself because my issues are not as great. Even sewage in the tub is enough to make anybody uncomfortable. But there are tenants here that are living refrigerators, are being told to put their food in the freezer in order for them to be able to keep and maintain their groceries. They're living with flooded waters. Currently, when you come into the complex, there are literal huge puddles of water where you're driving through them constantly. They're constantly flowing. In front of my window, there is a large puddle that has been there for a better part of a year. They're doing really nothing to solve any of the issues. Almost everything that they do in regards to the plumbing and between June and September, I had to call them, particular management, the owners of this property over 100 times in order for them to get them to do something about the plumbing. Once they had come and they sent the plumbers out, the plumbers all tell us the same thing. A large part of the reason why plumbers don't like coming out to this property is because they do not pay the plumbers on time. And then when we ask the management, why is it that it takes so long for us to be able to get someone out here to do things for us in regards to the plumbing or electrical issues? We're always told that we their hands or these things or those things. So then we turn to code enforcement. Well, when code enforcement is involved, they come in at a later date. It's like once they give us the opportunity to air our grievances, they do not come back to us. Some people never get them to come back. Me personally, I listened to
Ms. Andrews, excuse me, 1 minute.
September, I didn't see this, sir.
40 seconds.
Sorry. I'm sorry. So when I did reach out to code enforcement took almost till December to get back to me. From the month of December till January, month of December 28th to January 22nd, all I had was sewage in my tub to be able to help us get a better, kind of understanding between code enforcement and getting with the residents in regards to some of these issues that we're having at Treeside Park Apartment. So, the bridge that we have to get to help some type of faster, response between code enforcement.
Ms. Andrews.
The grievances that these people have here.
Ms. Andrews.
Yes, sir.
Your time has expired.
Yes.
Commissioner Howard, any questions for Ms. Andrews?
Good morning, Ms. Andrew.
Good morning.
Yeah, just want to say thank you for taking these pictures and coming for the commissioner, which not only your place a resident, but unfortunate throughout the city, they own several apartments complex, and all of them are what you're showing on the picture. So when you get through speaking, I'm going to ask the city manager question, what can we do to try to eradicate this problem, which I realize is a huge problem, but I think that I just wait to the end and then I ask the city manager some question about it. Thank you. Thanks for coming and sharing your concern.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions for Ms. Andrews?
Thank you so much.
No questions.
Is Commissioner Fletcher with us?
Yes, sir, I'm here now, and really no comment, but I will tell her that I will stand behind anything that we can do as a city, because it clearly looks like there's a possibility that you're following up under what we commonly call as a slumlord, and that's not right. You or no one else should live under them conditions. If you don't have my phone number, I'll get it to you personally, and I'll back anybody that will do something about this problem. Again, I'm sorry that y'all are all living like this. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Warburton?
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. I know you and I spoke back in February, March timeframe about this particular issue. So like Commissioner Howard, I'll wait and see from a city standpoint options that we have. So certainly my support's there, and just want to hear what we can or can't do, private property versus public and code enforcement, and I'm sure there's some options. And so look forward to hearing that discussion maybe when we're finished, as Commissioner Howard insinuated. Yep. Thanks.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. I just want to apologize for what you and the residents out there are experiencing. I will say, I do think that, more tenants need to come forward and, with solidarity and organization with, you guys, and that would, kind of form a stronger bond in terms of having these, complaints actually acted upon. What I would like to see, at least from code enforcement and us as a city, is that we, meet the same energy that we go after, blighted properties and properties of individuals go after these slumlords with that same intensity, meet that, that same energy, because a lot of times, because it's a corporation or because it's a company or some landlord we may be affiliated with, we don't have that same vigor, but we need to make sure we're treating everybody the same. And especially for, folks like you who want to have a decent quality of life. Nobody in Albany, much less, Doherty County, should have to live under those conditions, and we should not accept it as a board. We should not accept it as a city government, and we shouldn't accept it as citizens. So thank you so much.
Thank you also.
Ms. Andrews, the connection we had was poor for much of your presentation, but once you showed the photographs, there's not much to argue with there. Do you have your comments? Do you have a text of your comments?
I can send you a text of my comment.
That would be good. I mean, I did not know till halfway into it who owned the property. And of course, it's not a city property, but I understand that you have some concerns that code enforcement was not aggressively responding to concerns or investigating code violations at this complex. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we could certainly look into that, and I think we have an obligation to, and I apologize if the city has not done everything we could, but we do appreciate you bringing this to our attention, and I can assure you that your concerns will be investigated, and hopefully we can provide some relief to you and the other tenants. Where is this complex located?
It is located at 2315 West Gordon Avenue.
Okay. And how many apartments in the complex, if you know?
In Albany. It's more like 60 or 70 units.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have one more question of the city manager.
Hold on, Commissioner Young. Did you have a question, Commissioner Howard?
To the city manager.
Okay, we'll go through the table. We'll go around one more time. Go ahead.
Ms. Superman.
Yes, sir.
Good morning again. As I said in the past, when a list of all of the property that was handed out, my first question is, has this corporation, are they current with paying their light bill?
It's not, as of yesterday, if this is one of the K-Stamp properties, I wanted to go ahead and get that up to be sure. There was a deficiency. Is this one of the K-Stamp properties? No, I didn't think so. This is a different complex with a different property manager. I was trying to get a hold of Augustus Tutu to see. I do recall that he did go out and staff went out. As Commissioner Warrington said, I think it was the February-March timeframe. There were some internal plumbing issues that were not on the city side. So we went to make sure that we didn't have a backup on the city side, and we found that that was not the case. The case was on the property side, and so I believe an effort was made to inform the landlord of the deficiencies there. But as stated, we are somewhat limited with private property. If it's a life safety issue, I think code enforcement can go in as long as the tenant allows us to go in, and we can write up, what we find. But this is not an uncommon problem in our community, unfortunately. There are slumlords in our community, and they fail to adequately maintain their property. A lot of times they maintain it just below what the law requires, but that is still not livable or not decent. So this is a consistent challenge that we have in our community.
I agree, Ms. Superdan, and the sad situation about Ms. April and other individuals that reside in these places. I can go back to 2003 when former Governor Sonny Perdue, there was a bill called 730, 753 or 757, I can't remember the bill, but he had the word slumlord eliminated from the bill and saying that individuals like this, it has to be complaint driven, that code enforcement cannot go into private property unless there's a complaint from the tenants. And I just want to commend Miss April for doing that, because I get calls all the time, individuals realize that it's deficient in landlords won't fix the property. But my question, I always ask them, if you complain in the near future, be ready to move, because most likely they're gonna, ask them to be kicked out. But so it's a problem that not only in Albany and surrounding counties, but I can attest you in the General Assembly, most of your slumlords are elected officials, and the bad part about it, they wrote the law, and they know what to put in it and to put out of it. So that's something we would have to take up with our elected officials, and because those other 16 units, that 1,600 we talked about this year, they have a lot of deficient in them as also. So we just need to let code enforcement go in at her approval and just look at those apartments from top to bottom, because those apartments are over 40-some years plus. And instead of just doing the minimum, and I will go on record to say that a lot of these individuals realize that they know it's going to be low income, moderate income individuals in these apartments. So they feel that they have no obligation to keep these apartments up to code. So if we can follow Ms. Suber there, and I certainly hope that you can pass the torch and get with Mr. Tutu and say, go out there and inspect a piece of property. And then if Ms. April will give a list of other individuals having these same complaints, then if we go to court, we will have some grounds to stand on to say that it is an unfit structure for citizens or for humans to live in. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions for the city manager?
No, sir, no questions.
Commissioner Fletcher, any questions for the city manager?
No questions.
Commissioner Warburton?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
Yeah, I just had that same question that Commissioner Howard had, whether or not they were current. I know we had an issue, I guess with a larger complex not paying their water bill on one of those master meters, and pretty much putting the whole complex and their residents at jeopardy of having their water cut off unbeknownst to them. So that's just kind of the pattern that we're starting to see with a lot of these kind of large complexes that have management outside of Albany, where they can't be readily called, and we always going to one overworked and possibly neglectful property manager. So we really do need to do what we can to get the contact information for these larger complexes. That's a bigger issue in itself, is that a lot of these complexes aren't, we can't for whatever reason, we can't engage them readily, even when code enforcement comes. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. What I'd like to see, if we could get a summary, Ms. Subadan, for the last 24 months of the complaints that came from 2315 West Gordon, any work orders that were generated, any reports. I do think we need to verify what the city has done. I believe I interpreted Ms. Andrews to have some complaints with the manner in which we responded, and I'd like to have the details on that.
Yes, sir, we'll get.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Mr. James Pratt, Jr. Mr. Pratt wants to speak to the commission on systemic racism and public safety.
Good morning.
Okay, Mr. Pratt, you have 5 minutes.
Dr. Pratt.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Dr. Pratt.
Well, I would like to request an extra 5 with the consent of the board.
Sir?
I would like to request an extra 5 with the consent of the board.
Okay. The mayor would be disinclined to grant 5 additional minutes, but if the majority wants to grant 5 minutes, what's the will of the commission? Commissioner Howard.
Yes.
So would that include questions or what?
It would include questions depending on what questions you have, but I feel like the presentation deserves 5 minutes and it would capture the sentiment of what I'm presenting here. As we've seen in other presentations before us with folks that are experts in their particular field.
No problem. Mayor Pro Tem?
I would say we keep it to 5 minutes as we've held the other speakers to that.
Sir?
I would say that we keep it to 5 minutes as we have held our other speakers to that 5-minute limit.
So that's a no, is that correct?
You're correct, yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Fletcher?
No.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yeah, I prefer we keep it to 5 minutes.
Okay. Commissioner Langstaff?
Keep it to 5 minutes.
Okay. Commissioner Young?
I would grant the 5 minutes, in as much as, other delegations come before us and they're pretty much given however much time they need to speak. I think we need to have that be an equitable process that everybody gets to speak or be limited in speaking.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Well, of course, presenters aren't limited to 5 minutes. It's citizens that have 5 minutes, and Mr. Pratt, so you have 5 minutes. I'll tell you when you have 1 minute left. If you want to come back in 2 weeks and finish your presentation, you're certainly willing to do that.
All right.
Okay. You have the floor.
All right, thank you. So first I want to start with an apology. I've spoken with many of you all about systematic and systemic issues here in the city of Albany. And one commissioner mentioned to me that oftentimes there's a deep misunderstanding of issues and we need to explain it maybe like a 5th grader, and that's very important to do. So I want to start with some key terms, and I will be coming back to the commission to talk a little bit more. Next slide. All right, so a couple of definitions. What is a stereotype? Many of you are familiar with a stereotype. It's a generalizing of a characteristic or a behavior about a group that can be race, class, or gender. And many of you are familiar with the concept of racism, discrimination based on a race. Now, I want to focus in on particularly anti-Black racism, which deals with systematic issues, kind of like what the previous slide and things like COVID-19 has impacted, or the previous presenter kind of presented. So anti-Black racism is a form of racism that implies the history and the context of racism born out of defining Blackness as fundamentally evil that impacts systems. It can either be overt or covert. It can be de jure, which is by law, or de facto, which is outside of the law, similar to what we've seen in Jim Crow. Next slide. Definitions of what governments are made of and can do. What is an institution? It's made up of agents, like you all, using systems made up of parts and processes to create a set of outcomes, whether that be government protections, values, all these kind of things. What are institutions composed of? Culture on one end and structure, and you can see some examples of both of those there. Now, systematic and systemic. Systemic comes from kind of medical definitions. This means spreads throughout the system. So for example, issues with housing that disproportionately impact the black community. COVID-19 that disproportionately impacts the black community throughout the system. Systematic, repeated methods and processes. Methodical, right? And finally, this is the most important one, complicity. A lot of people try to move away from blame, saying, I'm not racist, I don't do these things. But one can be complicit in a system without knowing there are. And that's what I want to focus on today. Next slide. So 2 quick quotes to illustrate this. And these are some wonderful quotes because they relate directly to Albany. One is by the city's founder, Nelson Tipp. He says, the Negro in his native land and in his natural condition was the embodiment of ignorance and the personification of evil. Slavery to be, he believes slavery to be the expressly sanction of the word of God. And finally, Native Africans occupied the very lowest position in the scale of humanity. This is something our founder said, and we have several statues that represent this founder, right, without any context. W.B. Du Bois, who visited here to study the condition of black people after Reconstruction, discussed how the black farmer started behind. He contextualizes that we can't escape history, but we have to reckon with it. Next slide. So, to set up the standard for understanding systemic and systematic racism, based on those definitions, I want to provide a framework, something that perpetuates complicity, aspects of culture, systemic, and or function, systematic, within and associated with our institutions of government. Next slide. And so this is some research and evidence that has illustrated one particular issue related to racism that is part of systemic and systematic racism. I've sent this to some of you commissioners. I don't think you've engaged with it, but this is some critical and peer-reviewed research that engages with some of the issues in one particular law here in the city. Next slide. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I just came by some of these examples by doing some evaluations of the city and interacting and doing open records requests for my own issues with the city. So emails that say, I'll die at my darn desk, and a person that got even more to say, these are types of emails that we've gotten from the city, from city officials by mistake in many instances when dealing with race and racial issues, saying, I'm not racist, or being comfortable not saying Black Lives Matter. Another example of complicity, but not necessarily intentional racism, describing community groups as the usual suspects. Another one is ignoring and misusing data, ignoring the actual statistics that a law—
1 minute, Dr. Pratt.
Thank you. A law impacts 95% of black folks given the culture and 88% being black men. Denying the socio-legal research that clearly explains how this is a racial issue. Relying on conversations with community leaders who have oftentimes failed us in this community given the rates of crime and violence and all these aspects, but relying on them and denying expertise and critical awareness of issues that are systemic and systematic. Attempts at control and silencing. I did a presentation before and I was told, don't chastise us, as if the body of the government has some moral authority, rather than functional authority with a moral responsibility. You all have a moral responsibility to actually listen and work these issues. Delaying and denying black community leaders from speaking on such issues. 2 community leaders, black folks, were denied to speak on sagging back in February when this issue originally came up. Next slide. These are some emails that actually came across through open records requests that illustrate
Time's
this.
expired.
Thank you.
Dr. Pratt. No, finish your, go ahead.
Appreciate you. Next slide.
No, I mean just your last
Yeah, I got
comment.
you. Any questions?
Okay, I mean, can we go back to the last slide?
Oh, sure.
Okay, well, you were talking about, you picked this up on the email. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So these are some examples of microaggressions and things that actually were sent to me by mistake, and others that I got through an open records request that kind of illustrate ways that people have been complicit in reinforcing a culture of obstruction and abuse of power in the government when it comes to racial issues. And
Okay.
you put the next slide up.
Okay,
Thank
no,
you.
you can pick it up there next time. Okay, questions? Commissioner Howard.
Thanks, Mr. Pratt, for your presentation, and see a new word that has been tossed around for a number of years: microaggression, microassault, and micro-insult,
Sure.
which is not new words, but just paraphrase. So look forward to your next presentation.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mayor
And to
Pro
be
Tem.
clear- And to be clear, microaggressions are individual level, and what my focus is also on the systemic and systematic level as well. So thank you for that, Commissioner.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions for Dr. Pratt?
No, sir, no question.
You can put the last slide up as well, just to, those are some questions that people can ask.
Okay. Commissioner Fletcher?
Well, I do want to ask James, and I might not have heard you correctly. Did you tell me that the last time we talked about baggy pants as a commission, that the African-American community was not able to speak?
Okay, so to answer that question, a couple things. Back in February, two community leaders, I think the NAACP president and another black gentleman, did the proper process to speak. They got a call and they were told, y'all are not going to be able to speak at this meeting, and we may do this at a later session. That's an example of denial, and unreasonably so in my perspective. And even then, later on in July, when it actually came for a vote, two of us, including myself, signed up to speak, and we weren't recognized or given the opportunity to speak. I've made this complaint to the city. There's several emails I've sent to my own commissioner, to the clerks, and part of those emails came as a result of me asking for those to get permission to speak and to engage with the city commission. So absolutely, there are two different circumstances that I'm speaking of.
Well, the reason I ask you, James, because I might be wrong, and I apologize if I am. It seems like I remembered you speaking on this topic, and you making a point, and you even explained your point, which I got it when you wore your pants very low, and you were using that as a demonstration. So it just threw me off. I mean, I don't know of anybody being denied to speak. I know that if it's not on the topic of the day, sometimes we don't. I mean, it's got to be on that topic, but that's just what jumped out at me, and thank you for your time, sir.
So I can respond to that. So I can actually forward you the emails that clearly delineate the timeline in February where I individually presented on it, and then in the following month where two black leaders were attempting to speak directly on this. My first presentation wasn't just on sagging, it was on 13 items related to systemic and systematic racism. The other two speakers directly were trying to speak on sagging, and according to the clerk, they were not being allowed to speak, though going through the right processes. I spoke a few months later about, again, racism at large as a part of Cerrigal Rising, and then in July, we signed up properly to speak when the actual vote happened, which is a critical moment, but we weren't recognized and we weren't allowed to speak. So I have some emails and some details that can detail that, but that's the timeline and that's what happened.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, James. Have a great day.
Commissioner Warmington?
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Always appreciate the dialogue and the challenges, and even outside of here, you and I have talked on different topics, so I appreciate you coming and speaking to us.
All right, that looks like action.
Commissioner Lang?
Excuse me?
I said thank you, but that looks like action.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. I can't see the last slide. Did you take it down or what?
There's another slide with goals and solutions if you're interested in that. I know I'm beyond my time, but there are some goals and solutions that are here because the end of the presentation is how you can help, which is the main part, but I respect the board.
I just wanted to, I guess, focus on that last slide because I guess in reading I was kind of disturbed with the tone of it. I still can't see it. Can you go back to the last slide? This is questions and thanks, or what was the slide for the email? That's the one I'm trying to see.
Can we go back?
Slide 8.
Can we go back to the, which slide is it, Commissioner Young? Next one, please.
That's it.
Okay.
And this was just the illustration of the culture of obstruction around racial issues that is emblematic and inside the system of government that we have to reckon with. We have to change our frameworks here.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's really unfortunate. I see a lot of it redacted, but that's really unfortunate because, you know, as I say a lot on this board is that sometimes we're going to have to have those hard conversations. A lot of people want to avoid conversations because it's uncomfortable. And nobody really wants to speak to the history as you did. You know, we do erect monuments, you know, to people who held these views, as you espoused just then. And, you know, that's what's problematic in a lot of the things that we do in this city. And a lot of the arbitrary decisions that get made when allowances get made for other folks, even and I'm not saying that it was a racial thing, but I think it's just, an example of what we do kind of when we allow, simple things. We allow, somebody with a position, somebody with a delegation, somebody with an organization to speak as long as they want to. But citizens who we're here for, citizens who we're elected by, in that same forum, and I know it's a different format, we give them 5 minutes and that's it. No more than 5 minutes, but, anybody else can come up and speak as long as they want to, as long as they, I guess with the right organization. I think we have to fix that. We talked about that at our retreat, and those are the things that we need to, do better with as a board. But I appreciate your presentation, Dr. Pratt, and look forward to more of it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I noticed the mayor shook his head at this, but I've watched several meetings where the time has been extended for even individual presenters where people have asked for additional minutes, and it was granted willingly. So I just want to put that on the record and make that clear. Just an observation.
Thank you, Dr. Pratt.
Any questions, Mayor?
No, sir.
Well, I'll end with this quote from Martin Luther King. He says, "I must confess that over the few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate," and this is Dr. King speaking, "have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens counselor or the KKK, but the white moderate, who is devoted to order than justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with you with your methods of direct action,' who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Pratt. Next item on the agenda is consideration of the procedure to appoint a public defender. My understanding is Ms. Hightower has resigned effective last Friday. Ms. Talbert?
Yes. Yes, sir. She sent a letter to the commissioners, and it's my understanding that HR is in the process of advertising.
Okay. Mr. Davis, is there a procedure for appointing an interim public defender or solicitor or somebody?
I don't know of a formal procedure, but obviously you and your colleagues would have the power to do so.
Okay. Any question about this, Commissioner Howard?
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Since Ms. Hightower resigned, she didn't give a reason why this year.
Not that I know of. I guess we could, I know she was driving from Valdosta, which I thought was going to be a problem from day one, but I think I mentioned it.
I do remember that coming up when we was looking at
Yes,
it this year, and I guess for what she was driving for, and plus, trying to recompensate her, we probably just, see can we do it from in-house or someone close by that will be willing to do it, rather than coming from out of town just for a part-time, position.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, sir. Back when we appointed Ms. Hightower, didn't we have a couple of other possibilities at that time?
I don't recall if we had more than one applicant for the public defender position, but we'll certainly, I guess, HR is going to retrieve the application before. Is that right, Ms. Talbert?
That's what I was told. HR is going back
Okay.
and getting those applications.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that'd be my recommendation. Let's pull up those other applicants and get with them as soon as possible to see who we might could hire in replacement. Thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No, I agree, no comment. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Warrington?
My question really is for Mr. Davis. So in the meantime, Mr. Davis, do you have potential public defenders that can fill in single days, or do we just go without a public defender until we appoint someone?
I haven't heard anything from the court in that regard. I assume they're also searching. I noticed the resignation letter was dated March 25, but I believe that you and your colleagues, this document didn't even get here till sometime in April. So I think that's why everybody's behind getting a public defender.
Mr. Beden?
HR received an application. HR received an application from Najia Bridges, and she's available to start immediately. I believe that resume was circulated out to you.
Okay. Do we have somebody to cover until we hire someone?
Not really, unless, I don't think Nathan can do one more thing.
No, okay.
Or do you mean, I think the court can hire somebody temporarily.
Okay. Well, we need to check with Judge Weaver. I mean, I think we're gonna have some problems if we don't have a defender. But I'm sorry, Commissioner Warrington. Is that all?
If somebody's
Somebody's trying to say something.
Who is it?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Oh, good morning, Mr. Brooks.
Hey, how are you doing today, sir?
Fine.
Just want to update you on the municipal court situation. Right, we did receive that letter of resignation effective the end of, or the 25th, effective on last Friday. For an interim, I had checked with Nathan, and we are fortunate to have Karen McWhite, who is an attorney, who has also done this work before. So in the pinch, we were going to have her until we got an interim officially designated, and then again, if we needed to, until we get somebody designated by the commission. Just so you know, the courthouse right now is closed this week.
Okay.
It's been closed due to a water leak, so we really haven't had to have Karen step up to fill in as a public defender, but we were not going to let it go unfilled. One other comment before I leave. Karen is suggesting that we look at the same option you all followed when you brought Gary Lamar in. You hired a firm, and then Gary Lamar from that firm is the primary. The reason why she was suggesting that might be a good way to approach it is if Gary has to be absent for any day, he coordinates with another attorney in that firm, and they come in and fill in. So the payment actually goes to the firm. Our payment goes to the firm, and then the firm ends up distributing it as to who recorded the hours. So that's just something to keep in mind as we start looking for a public defender. So rather than hiring an individual, maybe look at hiring a local firm so there's some other available people that could come in and substitute as needed.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Warrington, anything else?
No, so I guess, Mr. Davis, do we need to take action to use Miss Kimberly Brown Williams interim? Is that something that the court and yourself can coordinate, and then we would just take action on the permanent position?
Yes, sir, that'd be a good route to go.
Okay.
I don't know what the hourly rate, I think, that they're paying, but if that's acceptable to her, it would work. Thank you.
Yeah, she was doing it before, so she's willing to fill in short term. That's great. All right. That's it.
We appreciate that. I mean, I do remember Ms. Brown Williams, basically, the reason she gave the job up, it wasn't adequate compensation. But Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Young?
Nothing further.
Okay. Thank you. We'll look forward to getting those, the resume of the one individual who applied and anybody else. But it is being published, is it not, the vacancy?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is consideration of an agreement for operation and management of the Government Center. has, the mayor down here, I think we've seen the proposed agreement. It was initially presented by the county attorney, and Mr. Davis made some corrections. We looked it over, and I guess we need to discuss how we're going to proceed with this. Is that right, Mr. Davis?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. We just, background, we determined that, what year was this? 88. The city and county entered into an agreement for the construction of a government center. There were bonds issued. The county paid off their half of the obligation through SPLOST funds. I think at a later date, the city acquired some SPLOST funds, and the indebtedness was paid off, at which point in time Attica had an obligation to deed the property to the city and the county. It was several years before any action was taken. There's a deed on record, and this is an agreement for management of this building. Basically, as I understand it, the county administrator and the city manager would be responsible for making sure that the building is adequately staffed, maintained, insured, the utility bills are paid, and also presenting a budget detailing the anticipated cost for the successive year, and quarterly reports documenting expenditures for the building. Is that?
Yes, sir, that's a good summary of the management, how it'll take place. A major portion of the issue that's being resolved is on page 2, item number 2. Any capital expenses that may be out there are gone upon both parties agreeing to this agreement.
Okay, yes.
And then capital expenses in the future, there's a paragraph about the parties getting together and deciding on future capital expenses.
We're all aware of certain problems with this building. Ms. Subadan can enlighten us further, but I'm personally aware that on the 5th floor we have the glass ceiling, and it's repeatedly leaked. There's been some other problems, and I think the county has basically paid for all the significant cost of repair over the years, sometimes several $100,000, sometimes north of $1 million. Is that correct?
That's my impression. That's been discussed a lot, and again, those expenses would not have anything to do in the future then if this county has some outstanding capital expenses. The paragraph I referred to says they are in fact wiped out and everybody's starting at zero as far as capital expenses.
With the understanding they'll be shared in the future.
Oh, yes, sir, in the future. And
Ms.
again,
Subadan, did you want to detail the problems with the building?
I'm not really prepared to kind of go over all the problems, but I do know that the envelope of the building does leak, as evidenced by the water coming into your office and the city clerk's office. The most recent estimate to fix that is between $700,000 to $800,000, and that is not budgeted at this time. But I do think that given the amount of investment that the county has made, I think that should be a high priority to make sure that we seal the envelope of the building, because all of the interior work that was done will get destroyed if there is no plan to seal water from coming into the building. So I think that is the extent of it. The county did give us a 5-year schedule on other things that would need to be addressed. I shared that with you. I don't have it in front of me. But I believe that the building envelope was in that number, but it was lower than the $700,000 to $800,000. It was about $550,000, but there was an asterisk that said this is an estimate. And so we're kind of dealing with an unknown number at this time, but I would recommend that you make it a priority.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Subadan. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Howard?
No comment.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No comment.
Commissioner Warmington.
Yeah, just a question, Mayor. So the way this process works is really we need to send this to the county. I would suggest that maybe we do a straw vote in this work session and then to allow Ms. Subadan or Mr. Carter to go ahead and send this to the county. If we go to the 3 weeks of voting on it at the end of the month and it goes back to the county and they have 3 changes, then we're gonna have to it's kind of bring it back to us with the county's approval and city manager approval, county administrator, and that way we vote on the final version versus waiting. That would be my recommendation, Mayor, but of course,
Okay.
it's your decision, but.
Well, I think that's good.
May I respond to that?
Yes, ma'am.
We did go ahead and send it based on your straw telephone poll. We went ahead and sent it to the county administrator and county attorney as a courtesy so that they would know what we were discussing today. So that ball has already started to roll.
Okay.
Okay, so we might get the final version back by our last meeting then, I guess, but we'll just time will tell.
Well, I mean, that's, I think that's the prudent course to make sure that the counties, they got a meeting in a week or two and they can vote on it up or down if they got concerns about it. Okay. Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
No question.
Okay, so we're just gonna take a straw poll to see if we agree on the, agreement as presented, is that right? Commissioner Warmington, is that, okay. Commissioner Howard?
I agree.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yes, I'm good.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Mayor's in agreement, so I guess we can, would, Ms. Subadan, are you or Mr. Davis gonna be handling that?
Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter will handle.
Okay, all right, so, Ms. Davis, Mr. Carter,
Yes, sir, I'll get with Mr. Carter and we'll make sure that it gets, we'll stay in contact with the county attorney and county administrator and everybody. Thank you.
pursuant to Commissioner Warmington's recommendations, can we get some assurance from the county that this agreement is acceptable so that if we vote on it at the regular meeting this month, we know that's finalizing?
Yes, sir, I'll have that conversation with the county attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. The next item is a charter amendment. We discussed at the retreat. Ms. Subadan has advised us that she's had problems filling the Office of Director of Code Enforcement, and one obstacle has been that the city charter requires that the director be post-certified. I guess before Mr. Davis has, eliminated that. Is that correct?
That's at page 11. That's the linchpin of what's been done is eliminating the post-certified requirement for the code enforcement director. Yes, sir.
Ms. Subadan, are you aware of why that condition is in there?
No, I'm not. I think maybe at the time when it was passed, when I think it was back in 07, 08, I think the person who was then the director was a pro-certified individual, and so it probably carried with the person that was me, the code enforcement director at the time. Some of you who have history would know better than I. But what we have found with our recruitment is the applicants that come through with management experience, with the ability to really forge a vision, are not the post-certified. They're degreed professionals. The post-certified individuals we've interviewed, while they have some technical competencies and understanding of code, they don't really display, I think, the leadership that this board is looking for with forging path, a really strong vision for code enforcement, as was demonstrated in the early conversation today. And so the other thing I should let you know is this Friday is going to be Augustus Tutu's last day. He has received a really good job offer from his former military, and so he will be leaving us. And at this point, our proposal is for Walter Norman to pick up the code enforcement responsibilities, which he has good familiarity with and does have capacity, until we're able to get this recruitment going. But I do believe removing the post-certification will give us opportunities to broaden our applicant pool, and will give you better applicants.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner Howard?
Ms. Superintendent, you said in the past that this job has been advertised, you said twice, right?
We've been advertising continuously since,
Last year?
yeah. And we've interviewed a few times and just haven't come out with a candidate that we think is gonna really be able to carry the ball the way that, you know, we're now focusing on code enforcement. I think you have some really high expectations, and the individuals that we've hired, we just didn't feel that they were going to be able to get you where you needed to be.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No question.
Commissioner Warmington?
Yeah, I would ask Ms. Subadan, almost on a parallel path, I think it's incumbent upon us to look for outside options for code enforcement. I know we talked about it at the retreat, of the possibility of outsourcing that possibly, or looking at bringing in a contractor, but I would just ask that as a parallel second option is that might be a way we fill these vacancies faster. I don't know our current inspection contractor that's in our building inspection, if they provide those services or somebody of that nature. I just, in light of the news you just shared with us, that could be an immediate help in that area.
I'll pass that on to Stephen Carter.
Commissioner Lang? Commissioner Langstaff?
No comments.
Commissioner Young?
I just say thank you to Mr. Tutu for his service, and just, I guess, look forward to getting this code enforcement structure together. That's it.
Okay. Mr. Talbot, can I ask you, if we could go back through the minutes and find out what the discussion was and what the justification presented for requiring that the director be post-certified?
Sure.
Okay. The next item is another issue that was addressed at the retreat. It would amend the city charter to eliminate the condition that the city manager, city attorney, city clerk, municipal judge, et cetera, be appointed at the organizational meeting following elections in November. As we know, the city charter for some reason requires that these positions be appointed after the elections. I don't think that's a very good policy, but be that as it may, this change would allow the commission to appoint those individuals at any time and under such conditions as the conditions of employment as the commission seems appropriate. Is that correct, Mr. Davis?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That is correct. And no longer is there a specific date for making the appointments. It's at the will of you and your colleagues. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Thank you.
Also, we have the term in there. We've discussed before that it says for a 2-year term. We know there's a statute that requires a municipal judge be appointed for 1 year, but all the other positions would, under this change, be at will unless the city has a contract. Is that correct, Mr. Davis?
Yes, sir. Right
Okay.
now, everybody's considered at will. That's exactly right.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner Howard?
No question.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No question.
Commissioner Warmington?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
Do we have any, I guess, best practice data from this? Or I guess some type of example for comparison from another city charter?
we certainly get that, but okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Young, but I think Commissioner Young's asking, can we look at other cities to see if they have any kind of condition that imposes a requirement on the commission to appoint these individuals at a specific time? Would that be a fair assessment, Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir, because I'm just, you know, anytime we start, you know, making changes to the charter, you know, I kind of want to know what the rationale was, or what the, what was the reason before, behind doing it that way.
Okay. Well, I guess, how much trouble would it be, Ms. Talbot, to look at the minutes? I had asked Ms. Talbot before, and I think she said it's been that way since she came to work for the city. Is that right, Sonia?
Longer than that.
Okay.
So I go back to Joanne Pope back in the 90s, 80s and 90s.
Okay.
It's always been a 2-year appointment.
Okay. Ms. Davis, is there some way we could go back and find out when the charter was changed to impose this requirement, assuming it wasn't in the original charter?
I'll do my best, yes, sir.
Okay. And also, could we look at other cities in the state? I don't think any of the other ones have any requirement like this.
All right, I'll also check that, and I'll email out some samples from other cities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that sufficient, Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is, was discussed at the recent retreat. It would reduce the city manager's spending limit without authorization from the commission from $100,000 to $40,000. It used to be $40,000, and the commission several years ago increased that authority to $100,000. We've discussed that. It's in the minutes, and we put a 6-month extension. We never acted on it again. But this proposal, there's also an ordinance that parallels the language in the charter. Okay. Commissioner Howard, any discussion?
It's planned to what we want to do.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
No question.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No question.
Commissioner Warmington?
No question.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. Will we, I guess, look to reestablish this after finding a permanent city manager? Or move it again, because it seems like, I guess, making it, but I guess if we just voted on it, is there some way other to do that rather than the charter amendment? Or is that the only way to do it?
Well, it's in the charter, so we have to amend
I
it.
assume we have to do it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, that's what I was saying. I assume we'd have to do this all over again if the limit goes back up under a new permanent city manager.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That all?
Yes, sir, just trying to understand. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Young. The next item on the agenda is approval of a grant for Harlem Revitalization Plan. Mr. Wright has signed up to speak. Hold on, Mr. Forgy. Is that right, Mr. Wright?
You are correct.
Okay.
Happy New Year to all of you. This grant presents some challenges and questions, and the first thing is it reasonable to think that you can spend $20,000 and revitalize Harlem or any other area of the city? But just for your information, the people that own the Hilton Hotel, they had a bogus corporation back in, 2002. where they set up a corporation and said it was going to be Albany Holdings. You know, we gave them $250,000. Even before they existed, gave them $250,000 just for the Hilton Hotel. Now, 20 years later, we come back and we say we're going to revitalize Harlem for $20,000. I mean, does that make sense? Is it reasonable? The point we're making here is that I had three business locations, City of Albany, during the time period when Harlem was basically decimated because of innuendo. There were 34 businesses in Harlem when the effort was developed to build it, what we call the intermodal transportation center, the multimodal. The giant company called Day Wilburn Associates came here, did a bogus study, but they did identify about 35 businesses in the Harlem area in 2001. 6 years later, there was a 600% reduction. It went from something like 32 businesses down to 6. So with all that lapse of time, the businesses were not given relocation assistance or anything, as should have been the case. And for example of that, when Albany Tomorrow was existing, they gave each business $30,000 of relocation assistance and also a 42-month carry forward where they would take care of things about relocation, find another location, and those kind of things. So the City of Albany decimated the Harlem area, and like Harlem in New York, before President Clinton moved his presidential library and other things in Harlem and New York, they had to do a revitalization. So one thing we need to do in this revitalization is to have an anchor tenant or something that's going to magnetize and instill rebirth or another effort to the area. We stayed in 208 South Jefferson Street 30 years. Never got a nickel from the city. The giant company, Day Wilburn Associates, supposed to be doing the multimodal transportation. They did not come. They said they had talked with the business, and I can tell you I was there. No one ever contacted me from the city or Day Wilburn Associates. And by the way, Day Wilburn Associates made several mistakes, but what we need to do is to look realistically at how much will it take to rebuild the 6 or 8 blocks that comprise the Harlem Business District, and look at what would be an anchor tenant. The ideal thing would be use the multimodal as a way to get other businesses that could be adapted to the physical structure, the blueprint itself. I mean, when passengers come in, they're going to want to go get a soft drink or something like that. We do not need to do what we did at the airport. We spent $15 million on a new terminal and did not put the first restaurant in there. So we do crazy things, and then we come back and wonder why it's not working.
1 minute, Mr. Wright.
And what we would suggest here, look again at this and give people an opportunity to work on this plan and come up with a realistic plan and use the multimodal transportation hub as a catalyst and put some venues that accompany that multimodal facility. You will have people who may not necessarily want to do more than just come there and get a bus ticket. So in other words, you spread out the ability of the transportation hub to attract businesses who are willing to invest and relocate, and then the city needs to put in place some relocation funding for those businesses who will make the questionable step of coming back to an area that kicked them out in the first place, and now 20 years later saying, hey, let's get together. That seems to be an approach we need to make in this.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Well, what I will do is I will come back, because you need to have this environmental assessment to see all the derivatives that I'm giving you. This was done in 2018 by the same company that did the original study back in 2001. You'll see all of the mistakes they made in there. One of the things they said, for your information, they said the City of Albany owned the parking there, and that people are going to come to the multimodal they're gonna park their car at the parking deck and then walk back down to 300 West Overlook to get a bus ticket. See, all kinds of things like that is what you need to know. What we already know and think that something needs to be done to give a renaissance plan, meaning rebirth, a real opportunity.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Wright, Commissioner Howard.
Thanks, Mr. Wright, for your detailed explanation, and look forward to you coming back to give us another overview of it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mayor Pro Tem,
No, sir, no questions.
Commissioner Fletcher,
No question.
Commissioner Warrington.
Yep, Mr. Wright, just, so are you saying that you're against us taking this $20,000 grant? Is that your position today, is to encourage us to vote this down?
No, not to discontinue, not use it, but we do not see what the parameters are established in this, but the thing that needs to be done is need to be clear, and what are we going to do if the funding is insufficient? That is, will this grant go out and get planners and other experts to come in here and tell us what we already know? The city kicked the businesses out. The city did not give the relocation assistance like they did when the Hilton Hotel was being built, and we gave Earl Patton $250,000 to come here, and then we gave him another $7 million to build the Hilton Hotel out of SPLOST.
Okay, so you're saying you're for this, accepting this grant?
Forward to doing it, but it needs reconsideration because it's not realistic. I mean, Dave Wilburn would not come down here for $50,000.
Okay, all right. Thank you for clarification.
Commissioner Langstaff.
No questions.
Commissioner Young.
Good morning, Mr. Wright. Thank you for your presentation. And I know you know the ins and outs of all this stuff, but for the folks who are probably listening, you know, just to clarify a couple of points, this grant funding is simply for planning, and that's the amount of the grant. It doesn't pay anymore. It says that the city will be matching that grant with another $13,000, which would push the funding for planning up to $33,400. So, you know, hopefully we can, you know, get a package together. I trust that Mr. Forgier knows can do that to find someone to do this planning. And also, Mr. Wright, like I said, I was just coming into office when all of this was going on, but even with the transportation center, the city has given a lot of input to citizens through groups like the Uyghur Rising, and we were able to actually make sure that there were those things included in the transportation system, in the transportation center that you were talking about. And maybe, I think you are correct, there hasn't been a lot of, I don't think there has been a lot of interaction or engagement with those businesses who, like yourself, were located in Harlem and were no longer there, and that's probably one piece that we need to do a little bit more of with yourself and others, and hopefully we can do that. But I do think that, you know, we are on the right track with this, so I would look forward to you know, us sitting down to talk about that, because I would really like to see us keep that same cooperation as with all of Harlem revitalization and preservation that we did in planning for the new bus station transportation center. So thank you. And I also had a question, if you want to weigh in on it. Where are we in the process of, I guess, satisfying the federal requirements for the transportation system that you were talking about when you came to us last?
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the last part of what you asked. I know you mentioned the bus center, but the long and short of that answer is the transportation thing started in 2001, so it's been 20 years. So if it's 6 months or a year from now, if African American or black-owned businesses do not benefit, do we need it at all? That is, when I went to the work site, I only saw 2 black employees out there. And 49 CFR 26 is specific. It means contracts, it means economic opportunities. I'm an expert at some of these things, and no one from the city ever contacted me and said, William, you won't even want to look at this. So if we do not make any money, should anybody make any money? Let it stand with a clear lot until we come together, until we want to do something about fairness and economic opportunity. I gave Elaine Child, the Secretary of Transportation, a 42-page document that explained all these issues, what we need to do. I asked Mr. Hamilton, his boss, and everybody, I said, let's get together. Because if we're not going to make any money, what in the world is Jim Boyd doing making money? I mean, the money is coming here to help the city. Every time you go to the gas station and buy a gallon of gas, 60 cents of that gallon of gas goes to DOT, where this money comes from. So if we cannot share the thing that we've already paid for, should anybody have it? So that's where we are. We need to get together.
Yes, sir.
And look at a plan.
Okay, Mr. Wright, now, a lot of...
Could I ask that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could I ask that? Could I ask that same question of the city manager where we are with the bus station?
Certainly, we have not awarded a bid. It was out for the required amount of time. This is a federal project and state project. There are some local dollars and some local in-kind. We only got 1 bid, which is not going to be sufficient or satisfactory to meet the federal requirements for this procurement, so it is going to have to go back out. So at this point, nothing has been awarded, nothing has been presented to you or recommended to you. We've been clear a number of times, and we've had multiple workshops. And I believe Mr. Wright had a minority business workshop. We certainly believe that we accommodated him. He had it in one of our buildings, and we helped promote that. So we are certainly trying to get the minority business community to participate in these large federal projects. It does require federal DBE certification, and we're hopeful that we will see minority participation. We've told all the bidders in pre-bid that we're not going to be satisfied with the reasonable faith effort. We would like the DBE requirement to be met, and it's been set above what is typically required. So at this point, we are re-advertising in the hopes that we'll get more competition.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wright, I just want to point out, we're going to hear from Mr. Forgy in a minute. I think one of the requirements of this grant is that there be significant community engagement. So that is one concern you expressed that we'll have an opportunity to address during the process.
Okay, and well, just FYI, you'll find that almost every federal agency has a requirement for community engagement, especially when the federal dollar is involved. And there must also be correspondingly participation by disadvantaged business. Okay, what you do, no matter what agency you meet with, under what typically comes in there will be 24 CFR 135.30, which is a component to what typically would be in the issue that Mr. Forgy is talking about. So we're well familiar with that. Instead of using DBA, they came up with another acronym. You had to be C3 certified, meaning you're a low-income business and severely low income. But we have to get a handle on this, and the city has to be consistently recognized. In a community that's 80% black, And we go out and do these workshops all over the city and in the county. And yet no one does an objective job of living up to the requirements in the federal law. This is not something William made up. 49 CFR 26 has been on the books since 1980 requiring. So we'll meet with and see what Mr. Forgy has, but I can tell you we had one experience. Mr. Forgy is also getting a lot of federal money too that comes in that's below the radar because people thinking no one is watching or aware that he gets all that transportation money too. It's still covered by 49 CFR 26. And you must have. I went there one time to meet Mr. Forgy and his staff and asked them, why you do not have any minority business? Did not get an answer. So there we were violating the law. And I was there as an expert. I asked Mr. Forgy and the young lady assistant, why you all did not contact me or give me an opportunity. Never heard another word from them. All that planning money that comes here where they're looking at what's going to be the future of Albany and Dougherty County down Lido Road and other things, that's federal money. And it's covered by 49 CFR 26. And I mean, I could do the work and they don't even give you a call. So every time you send something up, we're going to make some contact with Pete Buttigieg, the new Secretary of Transportation. Matter of fact, we've already made contact with him about some of these things because the city has to be fair, has to follow the law, and there has to be equal opportunity. There is no equal opportunity when William and other people like William are not even given a chance. How in the world can I compete if the procurement office or nobody else calls? They cannot say they don't have my data because I fill out all of the paperwork as a vendor. At the same time, you all went up there to Chicago and hired KWA, and he gave us a notice, 5 days, going to talk about $30 million for bids at the airport and the transportation hub. He's there sitting there in Chicago and going to tell us about it. You're supposed to give him 30-day notice. So.
All right, Mr. Wright, we appreciate it. Now, Mr. Forgy, if you could give us further information about this process.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. This is a request for you all to accept and authorize signing of the contract for this award. This grant was given to the city, or notice of award was sent out about 9 months ago. It's been a delay getting the contract signed because the Historic Preservation Division, the state agency that is funding us, they have been reorganized. They were under the Department of Natural Resources, and over the summer they were changed to the Department of Community Affairs, and they've had some issues getting restructured and getting contracts out. But we did just recently get the contract, and we need that signed to move forward with it. The purpose of this grant, and as was noted by Commissioner Young, it's not a $20,000 grant. We're getting $20,000 from the state, but the total project cost is about $33,400. The city is putting in some cash and some in kind, and probably a lot more in kind than is noted. It says $3,400, but my staff will be working extensively on this. The idea behind this is to develop a revitalization plan. It's not to revitalize Harlem. We couldn't do that with $30,000. It's to develop a plan, and that is a kind of low amount for a plan. But what we're looking at is really emphasizing community engagement in this plan. Not so much the development part of the plan, because I think my staff is going to handle a lot of that. But what we want to do is have extensive community engagement. Harlem is an area that people feel very passionate about, and we want to get those people's opinions about how we move forward as a city and how they get some of what they want out of it. So everyone at least has the opportunity to say what they want out of Harlem in the future. This is through the Historic Preservation Division, so it is focusing on historic preservation, but it also is on community preservation. So it's a combination of those two things. It's a new type of grant. This is the first time the Historic Preservation Division's funded anything like this. So it's new territory for them, but it does have to focus on historic preservation. So we'll be looking at the historic infrastructure, buildings in Harlem, and also combining that with what the community wants out of it. So we'll be looking at creating a plan that designates on a broad scale what will go in probably parcel by parcel, or what could happen parcel by parcel, just to give the community and the government some surety moving forward with the development that hopefully is going to be generated by the new transportation center. We will have a plan moving forward. So if someone comes in and says they want to put a certain type of business there, and the community has already decided that type of business doesn't go there, we can easily say no. Or we can recruit the types of businesses that we are looking for. So at any rate, that's it. Just a very brief overview of what we're looking at. But we do need approval to move forward with this, and that someone will need to be authorized to sign the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy. Any questions, Commissioner Howard?
Mr. Paul, you did say the commission need to move, need a vote to move forward, right?
Yes, I mean, at the vote, the night meeting.
Okay. And let me ask you another question. It's been a number of years. Have you or any of your staff had a chance to look inside of the old Rich Theater?
I have not well, I don't know. In the last year I've looked at it, yes.
Ms. Superdan, since you will not be here, is it feasible that we can, as a commission, just look at it to see the ins and the outs of the building and what is needed? I know the last time they were saying something at the HVAC was going to cost over $250,000.
Yes, sir. We emailed out a report to you. David Maschke actually consolidated all of the evaluations on the Ritz and the Ritz Cultural Center, and I sent that out to you. It's several $1 million in order to bring it back. Part of what I'm hoping that the Harlem plan will identify is, what do you really want to do with it? The Cultural Center is not historically significant. And so do you want something there that is going to better serve the community, or do you want the Cultural Center to be renovated to serve the community? That's the kind of community input that's needed, and probably an evaluation of what each one of them cost. The bigger issue, I think, for this commission, though, is what are you going to do with it? So if it's going to be a community center, who's going to run it? What kind of programs are you going to want to have happen in there? I think that has to be all part of the community engagement. So as we go after dollars to do whatever it is you want, whether to build new or to renovate, you have a plan, as opposed to renovate and, you know, the build it and they will come only works on, you know, Field of Dreams. In real life, that doesn't work. You really have to have an end use in mind when you go to do this renovation. And so, long answer to your very short question, you absolutely can go in there. Several groups have been in there. You will be required to wear a mask if you go in there. There is mold in the building. But if you look at your email, there was a very extensive report done with a lot of attachments, but there was an executive summary on kind of all the plans that have been done for the Ritz and the Ritz Cultural Center and the current status. And if you need to, we can get that sent out again.
Can I get a hard copy of it sometime
Yes,
with a new
sir.
phone?
We certainly can make that.
Well, you can scratch that since you say it's mold in there. I think it would be not in the best interest with COVID still standing. Some of those little airborne pockets may be in there. So you can scratch that when you're asking to do a detailed overview of it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions for Mr. Forgy?
No, sir, no questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions, just thank you for all your work, Paul.
Commissioner Warburton?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Forgy.
Good morning, sir.
And I know you got so many things in the air, but did you give us a timeline on the grant?
The only timeline I can give you is it needs to be done by next May. So we
Okay.
would like to get, we're working on an RFP, and we would like to get that out. The state needs to approve it. We do want to share it also with some of the community partners who have expressed interest in helping out with this. So I would hope that we would have an RFP out within the next month to 6 weeks at the longest.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Ms. Forgy, obviously, sometimes it seems like the right hand don't know what left hand's doing. We are all aware that we are seeking a downtown plan, and I guess we're going to work together and coordinate these efforts.
That is the idea, yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. But
Yep,
thank you for your presentation, Mr. Forgy.
you're welcome.
Next item on the agenda is a proposal to purchase 25 self-contained breathing apparatus units. Is that correct, Ms. Beal? Yes, sir. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Not used to being here in person. Bid reference 21057 for self-contained breathing apparatus units was advertised in the Albany Herald on local channel 16, the website, and on the Georgia Procurement Registry. 4 firms were directly solicited and 2 submitted bids. Fire Department has amended the escape account from 30 to 25 from the original bid, and 10-8 has agreed to the quantity change of 25 units. They will honor the unit price they bid. We're recommending you approve the purchase of a total expenditure of $197,342.42. And this agenda item will be placed on the April 27 Commission meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Chief, do you want to speak to us? Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be with you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Commission. Just want to appear to say thank you for considering this. The SCBAs, of course, are very important to firefighters as they try to battle fires and dangerous conditions. These are the tanks that you see us wear on our backs and the mask over our face. This is what provides that breathing air as we go into those dangerous situations. And we're trying to replace those over the next 5 years. And we just thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Ms. Fields or Chief Scott? Ms. Howard.
Chief Scott, what's the longevity of these self-contained breathing apparatus?
We usually try to keep them 10 years.
So, in other words, the already outdated, right?
Not yet. We hope to have them all replaced over the next 5 years, which at that point they will be expired at that point.
So at this unit price, it's best to get them now, then wait to the last end of the ball game, right?
It is. We'll buy them over a period of time. It'll spread that cost out. We'll be back before you again next year. We'll be purchasing 30 next year, 30 for the next 4 years to sum it all up. So 30 breathing, we'll buy 25 this year, and then 30 over the next 4 years. Should bring us to a replacement, I believe, of 145 self-contained breathing apparatus.
In the next 5 years, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions for
No question.
Ms. Fields? Chief Scott?
No, sir.
Mr. Fletcher?
No question.
Commissioner Warmington?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
No question.
Sir?
I said no question.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask you, so the optimal number is 145 of these units.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to me why you need 145 units?
That will supply the firefighters who work in our operations division. Each person wears one when they enter what we call an IDLH environment, actually just a dangerous environment where toxic fumes, firefighters may expose themselves to that. And so this is to provide those SCBAs to them. They'll be placed on trucks. You'll notice there that you'll see face pieces also. Each of our firefighters have individual face pieces that they wear that's just for them. And so this will allow them to have that access to that equipment, which will be, of course, as we stated, going out of date, but it'll be replaced over the next 5 years. It'll give them that access to that. So this will be for all of our firefighters who are actually riding the fire trucks and actually going into these dangerous environments.
But what I was thinking is if you had 140 firefighters on duty at any given time, I mean, 140 fire positions.
Yes.
You're going to have 70 or less firefighters in the stations.
Oh, yes.
So why wouldn't 70 be a sufficient number?
We go by, all of those people are not on duty at the same time. We'll be somewhere around 42 to 45 people on duty. Usually have about 20 or so in our Battalion 1 and about that same number in Battalion 2. So you won't have a situation where we'll have all of our firefighters suited up at the same time. That would be the entire department suited up at the same time. We have 3 shifts that operate, so not everyone is there all the time.
So I guess what I'm saying is, why wouldn't, if 45 firefighters is all they're on duty at one time, why wouldn't 45 units be enough?
Yeah, well, you have to have some breathing apparatus for when those units go out of service, for additional pieces such as training our firefighters. They still have the same SCBAs that we wear as well. So there are a number of reasons that stretch that number of backup units, additional units on each fire truck, for example. Now, because we actually prepare for 200, you'll see the 200 number, you see 200 face pieces. We actually prepare for 200 because that means that we're able to suit up 200 people to wear those 145 SCBAs. That's what we plan for. So that's why that number is different. Because each individual has a face piece that they hook to this SCBA that's worn by more than one person.
Okay. So the unit isn't assigned to a firefighter, but the face mask is assigned.
Indeed,
to a firefighter.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I jump in?
Yes, ma'am.
So the SCBA is the mask in the tank.
Right.
If we had like a really, really bad top fire, you wouldn't have time to refill a tank. So you'd bring somebody out of the fire, replace their tank, they go back in. Is that right, Chief?
Yes, that's exactly right.
So you can't have just what you need for a person because that's how they breathe when they're in a building, and if it runs out, there is a way to fill it, but that way to fill it is very time consuming and it requires an additional unit to roll to fill the tanks. So what they do is have redundant units. So if there's a big fire, their tank goes out, they can pull them out, put them in a new tank and send them back.
What's the supply of oxygen in a tank?
It'll last, we hope 45 minutes. These are 4,500 tanks, PSI tanks, and we hope they'll last 45 minutes. But firefighters get in, they breathe faster because of the adrenaline of firefighting, exhaustion, so they use air, but it's designed to last about 45 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Ms. Fields.
Thank you.
The next item, Ms. Fields, is a discussion of the bond threshold for city contracts.
Good morning again. As was discussed at the retreat, the bond threshold is currently at $40,000, and if we're looking to improve the ability of small to disadvantaged businesses to bid on our projects, our recommendation is to move the $40,000 limit to $100,000. It also matches what the state currently does and has been recommended in past disparity studies. So I'm before you today to recommend that we increase the bonding limit from $40,000 to $100,000.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Any questions? Ms. Howard.
No question, but Mayor, when Commissioner from the 6th Ward ended up making his speech, I would come back and ask you a question.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
No, sir, no questions.
Commissioner Fletcher.
No question.
Commissioner Warburton.
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff.
No question.
Commissioner Young.
No question.
Okay. I see this, Ms. Field. Sir? Commissioner Young, did you say no questions?
I did.
Okay, thank you. I see the disadvantage, obviously, is you don't have the assurance of the bond here. But you pointed out that there are a number of contracts that could have been awarded to minority businesses had this requirement not been imposed.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you provide us the number of a course of a year? Was it 20 projects?
Not sure about the 20 projects.
Maybe it's
but
in the minutes here.
that probably was in the minutes.
Yeah,
from
raising the
last time I
threshold. Yeah.
presented it.
Okay. Yeah, 14 or amounts above 100. That's why I read that. Okay. But, Commissioner Howard, you had a question?
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you. At the retreat, this commission decided that they wanted to move forward with creating a disadvantaged business enterprise with a consortium. You said you was going to draft a letter and send a letter to the school board and the county commissioner?
Yes, I have got some ideas from staff. I just hadn't had a chance to get it done, but it's on my list of things to do.
Okay, and would you let us see a letter before you go out?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, that was understanding. And we did learn, Commissioner Howard, that the cost of the disparity study was considerably less than the $800,000 figure that we had. That was a mistake.
Okay.
So,
and just for those that are in the ordinance this morning, which that was an issue that was brought up at the retreat, and it appeared that all 6 of the commission and mayor decided that we would move forward with establish a DBE office in procurement with if the city and the county and school board would agree. And I wasn't surprised, but I think that the changing of the commissioners, that they had the blessing that we would move forward with it. And some may ask, why is that? When you look at it, the school, all elected officials in the city and the county serve the same constituent. And when we put things on SPLOST, that it is a continuance of the city, the county, school board, that we pass those SPLOST, and to create a procurement office that would enhance and to establish firm foundation. And as the city manager has said, is that we realize that for those that may not be aware of it, is that when you have transportation money coming in for the aviation, the transit, and highway project, that the federal law states that in good faith effort you need to try due diligence to hire individuals of color to award some of that to them. And as the city manager said, which I have said at the same time, if we are successful in doing this, it is going to be a task that if you want to bid on state and federal contract, you certainly have to be DBE certified from the state, and that certainly will be something that we would do as a training incubator, is to make sure we help those less fortunate in the community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
thank you, Mr. Howard. And the next item, Ms. Fields and Mr. Potter, it's the proposed tennis center.
Yes, sir. Consider approving a contract with EMC Engineering to provide professional survey and engineering services for a proposed tennis center, including pickleball courts at Tip Park, in the amount, the city's amount of $82,500. The county has already solicited proposals for providing this survey. That proposal is attached. They will be, the total amount is $202,640, but the city's portion is $82,500. The county is doing the tennis part of it, and the city would be doing the pickleball part of it. I have nothing else to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Potter, you have anything to add?
No, sir, just here to answer questions if you have them.
Thank you. Ms. Howard, any questions for Ms. Fields or Mr. Potter?
Ms. Field, you did say that the city park would be $82,000, right?
$82,500.
Okay. That's it, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, sir. I'm all for moving this forward. One question on EMC's proposal was on the tennis court side. It says architectural services were included, but as I look over on the pickleball court side, I don't see architectural services there. Was that unintentionally left out, or were they not providing the architectural services on pickleball as well?
That's for the building, isn't it?
That would be for the building.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Mayor Pro Tem?
For which building, I'm sorry?
If you look at the site plan, it's hard to discern, but what they have about 1,100 square foot building by the tennis courts. Yeah, but I think when they talk about architectural design, they're talking about a brick and mortar building as opposed to the design of the tennis courts.
Okay, well, I guess I just wanted to make certain that this provided the plans and everything that would be needed to construct the courts, the pickleball as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Warmington?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
No questions about this particular project, but I'm still kind of, I hope we can get the gyms at Bill Miller and Henderson back on track for remodeling. Seems like we're going to keep stacking other stuff in front of that, but I'm really looking for a solution to that from staff. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
I must admit, the meeting, it says that the city and county have tentatively agreed to construct the racket complex. It's my understanding that we were going to sell them the 6 acres to build the complex. I mean, I certainly was not involved in any discussions where this was going to be a joint venture, and I think the county first needs to buy the property from us before we go forward, and it would be, I mean, I don't know why the city is contributing to the project. Maybe is what do we have an obligation to contribute funds to this project for?
That's above me.
I guess we don't have an obligation to, but the feeling from the tennis association was co-locating pickleball on the site with the tennis center would have a greater draw. Pickleball is extraordinarily popular right now. Tournaments are being attended, which brings a whole different revenue source. We are getting the appraisal for the piece of the property that's ours. For the tennis center, a part of that property does belong to Boys and Girls Club, so I think they are also getting an estimate on what their cost would be and how the county reimburses them for their piece. So I wouldn't call it an obligation, but certainly, you know, if there's a desire to have a consolidated center, it would be more advantageous to have the engineering happen simultaneously.
Okay, so I guess what I missed here, the city is going to be responsible for the pickleball court.
Correct.
So that would be a city facility.
Correct.
Oh, okay. All right. And the tennis center on the other side is the county
That is correct.
operation.
That is correct. And they have confirmed the questions that you asked at the retreat, I think it was at the retreat, that they would be responsible for staffing it and they would expect to maintain it really on their own dime.
Okay.
So
All right.
they did
So
answer those questions.
basically what we've done here is because there is this interest in pickleball courts, the county's moving forward with the tennis center. We have elected, unbeknownst to myself, to construct some 12 pickleball courts.
Well, right now, we're just asking to get the engineering done, so
Yes,
you
ma'am.
can see the layout. We should have an appraisal value on the property by next week, and that was part of what you asked us to do. So that will be going over to the county, or coming to you first, and then going to the county to say, this is what we would expect you to pay us for the property. And then the next stage would be the decision to actually build it and bid it and open it and run it.
But wouldn't it be responsible to have some kind of idea what it's going to cost to build 12 pickleball courts, the parking lot, and the drive into the parking lot before we?
Well, that's what you get with the engineering. That's how you're able to get that layout and get a precise cost. We've got an approximate cost, but it doesn't take into consideration parking lot, driveway, and that kind of thing. I
What's
think,
the-
Craig, it was 275
No,
for 12?
no, ma'am. I got quotes for 7 and 14. The 7 was going to be 235,000 for 7 of them. So you can add, I guess, multiply that on out to whatever that comes out to be, sir. Sorry, I can't get that
Well,
in my head.
I mean, I there again, I mean, if some, but to Commissioner Young's point, here we got another project, I mean, that we're spending $80,000 on design, and you said 200,000 for 7?
230,000 for 7.
For 7. What you got designed here is 12 pickleball courts. So that's going to be, okay, in the range of $500,000 to do all that. And this is something that wasn't on the radar a year ago, even 3 months ago. So I just have some problems with it. But with that, appreciate it, Mr. Potter. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Does anybody else have any questions in view of what my observations? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah.
No, sir, no further questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Question?
Commissioner Warmington?
Just, I guess this would be off the cuff answer, but the property that we're looking to sell to the county, do we think that's a $100,000 piece of property, 50,000?
We don't know. We don't know. That's why we're getting the appraisal. We should have
Okay.
that for you next week. Probably before this comes to the regular meeting for voting.
Okay, so, and I guess this would help pallet the cost of the pickleball course, but it almost could be obviously whatever that cost of the property would go to pay for part or most of the pickleball courts, whatever that corner. I would suspect that corner should be a pretty valuable piece of property. May not pay for all the pickleball courts, but it certainly would pay for a good part of it. But I guess we'll find out when the appraisal comes back.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yeah, I think I get the same feeling that you got, Mr. Mayor, that the conversation wasn't, this wasn't the conversation we had at the retreat. It was more about buying property, not us building pickleball courts ourselves, unless I missed that part of it. I guess what I'm concerned with is again, as the mayor said, we're moving, fast tracking another project, and we have other projects that are from another administration that haven't even really gotten off of the ground yet, and that's what I'm concerned with. And the other thing too is, so if we sell them the property and then we build our pickleball courts on the property, or is this the same property that the pickleball court is going to be on, the part that we're selling?
No, the part that we would sell to the county would be for tennis. And I think we showed you a diagram of what the preliminary
there's a site
layout
plan.
would be. There was a site plan.
I think it's page 61.
Yeah, I mean, it's very preliminary, so what the engineering would do is to firm that up and give us a good estimate of the cost of building. And they would take into consideration things like grading to ensure there's no flooding and that kind of thing.
Any other questions, Commissioner Young?
That's all, Mr. Mayor.
I mean, I just think this is another example of getting ahead of yourself. We need a master plan before we just need to know how many pickleball courts would be sufficient. And, but so I certainly would be disinclined to move forward with constructing the pickleball courts until we had additional SPOS funds available, until we had the master plan. But with that, thank you, Ms. Fields, and thank you, Mr. Potter. And the next item on the agenda are interviews for the two firms, Wood Company and Lowe's Company, who were the highest rated by the PAG to do the recreation master plan. I saw we had Mr. Bond here. Who's going first, Ms. Fields?
That is up to you. I'm assuming, I know that Lowe's has a presentation to make. I'm not sure. I know Wood was offered the same opportunity. I'm not sure if they have a presentation, but, you know, the order is.
Do we have somebody from Wood here, or?
I don't believe they're here in the room. They should be on the call.
Okay. Do we want to make sure? How can we do it, Mr. Albert?
I'm sorry?
How can we determine whether or not somebody from Wood is?
I think they were supposed to call in. Is that correct, Yvette?
Now, we actually sent them the
Link?
The link.
I guess John Dawson and the guys in the sound booth, are they on the call?
There's a Walton on the phone.
Okay.
Okay. Who are we going first with, Ms. Fields?
Go on with go on with Wood. Start with
Okay.
Wood.
Good morning, Mr. Huffman, Mr. Walton. Anybody else with us?
No, but that's the two of us. Can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Lee?
Good
morning.
Excuse me, Mr. Huffman. Are we having 5 minutes or 10 minutes for the presentation?
It's up to you.
Okay. Commissioner Howard?
I would say 5 minutes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm fine with 5 minutes.
Commissioner Fletcher?
5 minutes.
Commissioner Warmington?
5 minutes seems to be the trend today. Yes.
Commissioner Langstaff?
5 is fine.
Commissioner Young?
I'm in agreement with 5.
I would say 10, but I'm in the minority.
that's-
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Huffman.
Excuse me, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You informed us that they would have 10 minutes for
Okay,
presentations.
I'm sorry.
And that's what we
okay.
told them.
Okay, thank you for correcting that, Ms. Field. So, excuse me, Ms. Field, we had a question from Commissioner Fletcher that I don't have.
I'll give it to you in a second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Huffman, Mr. Walton, 10 minutes.
Thanks, Bo. This is Ron. I'm going to turn it over to Lee and let him walk you through. We have about a dozen slides to go through in 10 minutes.
And good morning. I'm sharing my screen, but I'm not able to confirm whether you can see it in the room there.
It looks good, Lee. This is Ron.
Okay, good. So we will proceed. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about our team's qualifications, our approach and commitment to work closely with Albany to deliver a responsive and really practical recreation master plan. We're showing the mission statement from your Parks and Recreation Department here as we understand it, and we start our planning process is at the same place with a real focus on excellence, diversity, safety, accessibility, and sustainability. And our commitment to the Albany-Daugherty County community has been demonstrated over many years, and we're excited to have the opportunity again. Next. Our team is a blend of experts in community planning, public outreach, parks and recreation design, parks maintenance and operations, and then all of the associated environmental and engineering specialties. We cover really all aspects. We're a full-service firm and a team, including Wood, led by Wood, and then with PEQ, very experienced DBE subcontractor specializing in public involvement, survey, stakeholder engagement, and Freeman Engineering, a specialty contractor in parks design, construction, and specifically operations and maintenance. And as indicated here, we, and primarily led by Ron Huffman, have been involved in over 400 park designs, over $200 million in park construction over many decades, including many projects in Albany, and we're proud to have that heritage behind us. Our experience ranges, is really centered in Georgia, ranges across the country. Over 200 parks built in Georgia. The example clients shown on this page are some of those, and then we've also listed, to the extent of our awareness, all the parks in Albany and Daugherty County that we've been involved in planning, design, and related analysis over the year.
And this is Ron. You may not, for those of you who are new on City Council, just may not know that I first started working with Albany back in the mid-1990s, and that's how Bo, excuse me, how Bo and I first met, was doing parks planning. At that time, it was more targeted parks planning, but it was parks planning for Albany-Dougherty County, and you see the long list. I mean, I virtually know every park in the city in some form or another, have worked on some aspect of every park, and then of course some that aren't city or county parks, like parks at Cheehaw, working with the county at Radium Springs. Anyway, long relationship with you guys on your parks.
And like that, with other communities, Ackworth, Marietta, Statesboro, et cetera, we've worked consistently and for years to help develop as well as master plan park systems and individual parks.
Mr. Walton, tax staff is controlling the presentation. When you want them to change the slide, if you would, just say next slide, please.
Thank you. I apologize. I wasn't aware that it was working that way. Great. So we're on the correct slide. Our planning process starts with a strong kickoff, detailed work plan schedule, early coordination with key stakeholders. This is a process we've used many, many times. We know it from experience. And as Ron was just describing all of our past experience in Albany, we have a head start on knowing who the stakeholders are, and we're ready to establish, strong collaboration and approach around this process. And that starts coordinating internally with Recreation and Park staff and coordinating externally with key stakeholders.
You can see in that background picture, that's we're working in Radium Springs on the recovery after the tornadoes hit Radium Springs area.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So after the kickoff, after getting started, we evaluate existing conditions. We look at the existing facilities in detail. We look at population statistics. We'll have some benefit of some new data. We'll have pretty good data to work with, and we've got a variety of sources that we pull in to understand and perform demographic analysis. We've got data from a lot of different communities to look at trends and different factors that play into this. And we do all of this in close coordination with an advisory committee of Recreation Park staff and those who are day-to-day involved with your Parks and Recreation program, so that we're staying really close to the ground throughout the entire process. We're bringing ideas from other communities, but we're not imposing anything in Albany that's not true to Albany's recreation parks culture. Next slide. So our detailed facilities and programs demand analysis really works from different angles at the same time and goes in depth to identify priority needs, and that priority needs point is really key. There's going to be a really wide range of needs identified, but prioritization is critical. Where do we focus the limited resources that we have? Priority needs come from the combination of statistical analysis, demographic trends and similar, quality analysis, looking at the existing parks, facilities, and programs, and observations, definitely from citizen and stakeholder involvement. So our level of service analysis is not simply a comparison of what Albany has against national standards. It's more of a modified, customized approach that really takes into account Albany stakeholder and public input and reflects the uniqueness of Albany. Next slide. When it comes to maintenance, looking at operations and maintenance, we go in depth because this is where the rubber meets the road on sustainability when it comes to park systems. Individual parks, but especially at the system level, maintenance is key. We don't write the plan and then figure out what the maintenance and operation needs are. We work in an understanding of maintenance and operations implications at the early stages and then calibrate planning with that understanding as we work through, because we know that the system that is planned and that is developed is very critically what your staff and your budget maintains over many, many years, perpetually. Next slide. So the implementation plan communicates the vision in detail and how to achieve it. We paint a picture of what's planned for the community so they can understand, to give specific guidance for city leaders on land needs, development costs, funding options, and overall system management, but especially to communicate to the public, this is what we've understood through the process, and this is what's coming. This is very much about building trust, about building a sense of, realistic anticipation in what the future holds for the park system programs and facilities. And it's very visual. It's a combination of course, programs and cost estimates and budget estimates and identification of revenue sources, but the picture is critical. And these are just some examples of some of our past work on park master plan visualization. Next slide. So this slide comes a little far down in the presentation.
I'm sorry, Mr. Walton, 40 seconds.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Citizen participation permeates the entire process. And the key is Albany-specific public involvement strategy from the start and implementing that throughout the process. Next. So we use targeted efforts to get input from key demographics in the best way. We interview recreation program leaders and managers. We do on-site surveys, school-based outreach to youth, online surveys for working parents. We really do different approaches for different demographics to reach everyone through the process.
Thank you, Mr. Walton.
And I think the next two slides are simply final documentation, and thank you, and we'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Howard, any questions for Mr. Walton and on Mr. Wood and Mr. Huffman?
Thank you for your presentation.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No, sir, no questions. Just thank you for your detailed presentation.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions, thank you very much. Yvette Sills answered pretty well the questions I had, so great job, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Fletcher did ask, we were supposed to submit our questions. Nobody did so without, except Commissioner Fletcher and Commissioner Warmington. One of the questions she asked, and this is a very good question, how will the consultant make sure that the plan will be viable for the future? And we discussed this at the retreat, Mr. Walton, Mr. Huffman. Getting a master plan is one thing, but getting a master plan that we can afford and implement is something totally different. And so could you answer that question, please?
Yeah, it's almost, this is Ron, you're kind of cutting right almost why do we do a plan? You know, how do we make it viable for the future? I mean, I guess the first step is we got to work together, which Lee has emphasized. We have to plan together, work together, understand the Albany community to make it viable. And, you know, the past 25 years working with y'all, I've learned an awful lot, but one that jumps out at me is maintenance. You have some big-time maintenance challenges with the city. I mean, I've seen brand-new facilities get almost destroyed in a short amount of time, so we need to address that in a big way. I think adapting the plan or understanding how the plan in your community, we kind of need to look at the demographics of your community. I call it sort of planning for lifestyle. We have single parents, 2 income or 2 working parent households, so we need to start thinking about how to plan facilities with or programming for an extended offering times instead of traditional times. There's things, you know, new trends like esports, thinking about gaming rooms. There's year-round programming because there's a dependent on parent and single parent and 2 working households that youth have offerings year-round. So, I mean, there's just so many things we need to talk about that we can adapt to Albany. But I think part of it is just understanding Albany to make sure we customize the plan. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, the connection of trends to viability is making sure that the facilities that we have going into the future are the right ones that are going to be used and they're going to be worth the investment in operations and maintenance as well as development.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. Commissioner Warburton?
Yeah, I think a couple questions I asked, y'all filled in during your presentation. One question that I don't think you talked about was just an example or a couple examples of some other cities that are similar to Albany where you've done this very similar work where you're proposing here.
Well, this is Ron again. We had a list on one of the slides, but just the ones that jump to mind. Well, one, I've had the unique opportunity. I've been doing this so long that I've worked with communities that I've been able to start with a plan and for the next 30 years actually work with them to build it. An example is Ackworth, a much smaller community, but when I started working with Ackworth in the mid-1990s, they had 5 people on staff in the recreation department, and now they have 45 full-time staff, 150 seasonal, they have 600 acres. And with the exception of a piece of one park, I've been able to design and work with them on every park, building their park system. And I've been able to see and learn and understand how to adapt and witness firsthand how a plan can be worked and how it can help a community grow. Currently working with Statesboro now, another interesting community, a little bit smaller than y'all, but they started very much with an assessment, kind of, Ron, what do we have? And once we determined what they had and assessed it, then we put together a plan for sort of by district. We actually went by city district to build a plan for where to go, and those parks now are under construction. Bigger, maybe Lee can speak to Savannah. We did Savannah's Park and Rec System Master Plan. Lee, do you have anything you want to offer on Savannah?
I think the emphasis there was really on understanding the operations maintenance aspect of it and looking across their park system and recognizing how the budget was going to be impacted in the long term, making sure there's a clear inventory, detailed understanding of what they have and what their operations and maintenance obligations are going forward, and then a plan for budgeting support that coordinates with that.
Hopefully that answered your question to some extent.
It did, and I guess my last question would be from a financial standpoint. I think we shared in the bidding process what our budgetary amount was for this work. Do you believe that amount is sufficient for everything you just talked about, or you think it's more than enough or not enough?
Well, I know what we proposed, so I don't necessarily know what your budget was per se, but I know what we proposed, and I think the obvious is that we may be less expensive than others, but we should be, because I've worked on every park in your city. As Bo knows, I'm working on your streetscapes now. I know your town. I have a drawing for every one of your parks in my files right now. So, I mean, we should be able to give you the best value because of our familiarity with your city, the parks, the public program we're already running down there. So the answer is yes. I mean, I certainly think we can handle it.
Okay, and where are y'all based?
We're out of Atlanta.
All right, thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Good morning. Thank you, gentlemen. I guess the questions I had were pretty much, I see you all have a good bit of experience in facilities and parks, but I just want to know a little bit about whether or not you all have any experience in leveraging those facilities and parks into actual health outcomes for citizens. You know, Albany is unique in that it was a very hard hit in terms of COVID deaths, and we do have a number of health disparities in our community. And I just know that our recreation department in the past has pretty much focused on sports, pretty much focused on just parks. You know, we've got an initiative from outside agencies such as, you know, walking trails and biking trails, but that has not been something that has been built into our recreation department, which is just wellness. And I think that's really where we need to be, the direction we need to be heading in if we're going to talk about revitalizing our recreation department. We need to do so with a mind frame to improve community health first and foremost. But I just want to know what's your experience, or what are your thoughts on that area?
Well, this is Ron. That is a great comment. When I was taking notes about future trends in recreation, mind, body, and wellness is definitely one of the big trends in recreation right now. Mind, body, wellness, and looking at developing recreation offerings that are a one-stop shop, or a one-stop shop wellness center has become a really popular thing in recreation, where we can offer wellness for youth to senior citizens. We offer what are called silver sneakers programs. You have it all in one package. So I think that's a big deal. The other thing that we do, and Lee may speak to it, but we are one of the few firms, because Lee does this, we do a lot of what are called hazard mitigation plans. And part of hazard mitigation planning is planning for community wellness, that it's not just disaster preparedness. Because of COVID, we're having to expand what those plans include. Lee, do you want to speak to that at all?
I just simply say the confluence of environmental and recreation is really a key factor in wellness as well. And a lot of our firm's work is in the environmental assessment and engineering realm, where we cross-learn from environmental analysis, environmental planning into parks and recreation planning, and wellness is really at the core of all of that.
What about any, I guess, as you were saying, cross-referencing with, I guess, health entities, health institutions? You know, we have a major health provider here, and they do a lot in our community. Have you all had, you know, dealings with those institutions as well?
Well, they're key stakeholders in the process. So when we talk about, you know, citizen and stakeholder input, it's outreach and learning from any citizen who, you know, wants to take the time to participate, and we try different ways to reach out. But it's also those expert stakeholders in the community, the subject matter experts. And I'd mentioned previously the program managers for different parks recreation programs, but certainly the health experts, hospital, but also community, health department experts to weigh in, to get their take, to understand what they're seeing in the community from a health statistics and outcomes standpoint, and how we can influence that. And we're, being as close as we are to the CDC here, and I've got contacts there, and we talk frequently about the relationship between public health and health outcomes and recreation facilities. And we're just sort of, with a lot of the projects we're involved in, the Atlanta Beltline and other similar factors, that's at the foremost of our discussion.
Okay, and my final question is, I guess, culturally, what have been some examples of how you all have, I guess, come into a community to look at the local culture, demographics, to kind of guide whatever your designs are, or whatever you came up with in terms of a master plan?
That's a good question.
Yeah, well, I guess we customize every plan for every community. So, and I think there's uniqueness. Albany's always been, I've used it as a benchmark, and I work in other communities around the state. So, as examples, when we run youth sports programs in Cobb County, the typical cost is between $500 or $600 per kid. Albany, when I was back in the day working with Ken Williams back in the Parks Department, $30 or $35 was almost too much in Albany. So there was definitely a difference there, and we had to understand how the offerings in Albany are affected by that. Then there's just other alternatives there too, with maintenance and things we've talked about, that I've seen things like the playground we did at the Gordon Park. It was just melted to the ground, and I was just shocked. I've never seen that happen before, and clearly that's not a match. That was a deliberate, an accelerant was applied to it, and it was melted to a ball of molten plastic. Carver Park, I've seen the drinking fountain ripped off the wall of the restroom. So there's levels of design that we have to accommodate. And I don't know if that's cultural, it may be economic, but there's things we've got to think about when we work in Albany. But typically we design I've designed all kinds of projects everywhere and that always reflect the community. I'm a sculptor and an artist as well. The Radium Springs community, I designed the Storm Memorial pro bono for the victims of the tornadoes out there, and that was to be a reflection of the community. So that's kind of what we do. I give lots of examples like that, but I hope I'm getting close to what you're asking.
And, you know, maybe summarize it to say.
Yes, sir.
Use parks to tell a story. And in every opportunity we can, along with people's experience of recreation and wellness in a park, communicate historic significance, communicate cultural significance. And you've done a lot of that in Albany, and we've talked about, you know, examples from Albany and other communities as we've brought design concepts and storytelling and themes to parks and public spaces in other communities. So it's, there's a cultural and, you know, spiritual education aspect to parks as well as just practical.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Walton. Thank you, Mr. Huffman. We appreciate you being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Next, good morning, Mr. Bond. Appreciate you coming down.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor and Commission. It's good to be here with you all. I'm Mark Bond with Lowe's Design, and I believe we've got our partner, Whit Alexander, coming online here through the Zoom. He's going to be speaking today.
I'm sorry, who's that?
Whit Alexander.
Okay.
Yes. So I'll go ahead, I'll give it to Whit, so.
All right. And Jasmine, are you on with us too? We've got Jasmine Lewis on here with us as well. She's on the call with us too, going to be part of the team. But Mayor, Commission, glad to be here speaking with you. Glad Mark to be there in person to answer specific questions here in a moment. I want to run through a presentation of what we think would be a great plan for you guys, our process. Mark's going to be the clicker man. He's going to click the PowerPoint and move through here as we go. So Mark, go ahead and advance there if you would. A little bit of an agenda. We're going to give our introductions to the team. We're going to tell you guys why we think we're the best choice. We're going to give you our ideas for your project, and then of course the questions and answers to it. Let's see. Yeah, talk about, you know, Lowe's Design. Mark, which one are you on there? You're on the next. Okay. You know, a little bit about Lowe's Design. We've been around since 1982, dedicated to park and recreation design. It's the majority of what our firm does every single day. And when we're not designing parks and doing park planning studies, we're involved heavily in NRPA. Our founder was chair of the National Recreation Park Association. I serve on committees at the state for GRPA and at the national level. We speak at national conferences, state conferences, and we're regular sponsors of GRPA and their events and their strategies. There's a picture of several of us doing a cookout for GRPA, and over on the right you see that's me and the directors from Columbus and Lowndes County meeting with John Lewis a couple of years ago to try to bring dollars back to Georgia. Like I said, the focus of our firm, 2/3 of our total work is park and recreation based. We've worked in communities all across the nation. You see all the dots there. And we've got, Mark, over 1,000 park and recreation projects we've developed since 1982, over 300 of those in Georgia. We've done over 100 of these type of community-wide master plans where we study for the whole community. You see some examples there of the counties here in Georgia we've recently worked for, and some other places outside of Georgia. You know, Gulfport, Mississippi is a community about the same size and demographics as Albany. But besides comprehensive park planning, we've got hundreds of real-world park and recreation construction plans and construction experience. And that's, you know, we're not just concepts, we go all the way through development of all these types of parks. One thing that's very important in these types of plans is the capital improvements that we will recommend and cost estimating. You know, Mark, that's I'm gonna brag on him, that's his cost estimate there. That's a soccer complex in Lowndes County that's under construction right now. You know, he estimated 6.7 is the budget, and you see where the bidders were, 6.6, 6.5. You know, we understand what our park recreation, when we recommend capital improvements, you know, we understand what those things really cost to develop. Of course, we've worked with you guys over the past year or so. Mark's very familiar working on Carver, now Driscoll Park master plans, concepts for those. Being in town, he's visited all of your facilities, both the parks and the recreation centers. He's pretty familiar with the status of those. But, our work, and we're going to flip through this pretty quick, Mark, hundreds of park master plans that we've developed. Mark, yeah, there you go. Hundreds of soccer and football and lacrosse facilities, hundreds of baseball facilities, baseball stadiums, which you guys have, we've done those. Tennis and pickleball, y'all were talking about that a second ago. We've developed and programmed those kinds of facilities. And besides the parks, the buildings themselves, the concession restroom building, shelters, pavilions, we've designed all of those. And one thing that's going to be important for you guys, it was mentioned earlier, some recreation centers that you guys have that you want to look at repurposing. Our in-house architects design and program those types of centers every single day. Some of those are brand new that you see. Aquatics is very important to us. We've got a big portfolio of aquatics. And passive parks, places for people just to go out and spend time in nature. We've developed hundreds of those. Playgrounds of all types and all kinds of materials and all kinds of programming for playgrounds. And trails. We've got over 100 miles of built trails that you can go run and bike on today. And other stuff. These were things that are going to be important to your plan. There's First Tee. What are we going to do with the First Tee property? Well, we're currently working on a conversion plan in Hilton Head for a golf course. We've got over a dozen skate parks that we've developed. You guys mentioned that as being part of our overall plan. And something special I think that we bring to park planning is something called placemaking. Up in the upper left there, you see that's a complex in Waycross where we brought in the railroad theming to their building. Lower left there is a mural at Elizabeth Porter Park in Marietta. It was important. That lady there was very important in programming for youth in her community, and so we honored her with a mural in the park. Something that makes these parks special to your community is important. And design technology. Mark, hit those clicks there if you would. In terms of what we're going to draw for you and the kind of plans that we're going to give you, we're sort of past markers and magic markers and pencils these days. We're really getting 3D technology so your citizens really see the facilities that they're going to get when they give us their input. What is it really going to look like? We have that full capability that you see. In terms of our team, and I'll go ahead, Mark, and just hit the next slide if you would. We have a relationship already developed. Mark, I think, has been working well with your group and staff for the past year or so. But the rest of the team that you see there will be people that will be joining Mark. Jasmine joined our firm in the last couple of months. She's going to be important to the overall process, assisting Mark, the landscape architectural planning team. But in-house, we have our architects, Steve and Tawana, will be involved in developing concepts for the recreation centers. And whenever we run into a civil engineering issue, Asada will help us with that. But over on the far right is something I think that we bring that's special to this project. Your RFP specifically asks that we bring in programmers, people who can organize and staff, look at staffing. Darrell Walker is a friend of ours we've known for a long time through NRPA. He brings fresh eyes to the community on this. He's out in California, was director in Pasadena, and for many years developed lots of special programs to bring kids in, youth off the street, get them activated in aquatic programs, sports programs, e-gaming programs, all kinds of fun things that are important to youth, and he'll be part of our team making those recommendations. And John Gentry is a friend of ours that was director in Gwinnett County for a while, Oconee. He's also a commander in the Georgia National Guard, so he kind of knows a thing or two about staffing and operational and budget aspects, so he brings all of that together. So bringing all of this together, we've got a lot of national experience, but what does that do for you guys? Well, it means that we're constantly exposed to new trends, the best ideas from across the country, and we bring all those back here at home to Georgia whenever we do a new plan. And, I think we bring all of that and a working relationship with your staff. I think it's a winning combination. In terms of our process, we're gonna sit down with your team, other staff, establish the overall expectations for the project. Mark, there, next. And then when we get into the public input, we're gonna really listen to your citizens. I think one thing that makes us special, I think you've seen Mark in action, is our approachability. Jasmine will be joining him. She has a lot of community input experience doing the same thing. People feel very comfortable coming up to us, talking to us, telling us what they want. We try to make these meetings fun. It's not just us lecturing. It's letting people give us their ideas. We're going to bring in some focus groups, the Albany-Doherty Economic Development Council for their ideas. We want to talk to your youth, maybe your churches. We want to listen to what people have to say. We're going to sit down one-on-one with them. And then, during COVID-19, we've all had to kind of make a jump online a little bit. We've got software, Social Pinpoint's very important, helps us do an input through online services. And then we're going to do a survey.
Excuse me, Mr. Alexander.
And
50 seconds.
Oh, okay, all right. We'll go faster, Mark. Skip on ahead there, Mark, if you would. Survey, community profile, on through, Mark. Fiscal analysis of all your plans, all of your sites. Sports tourism, that was something important. Keep going, Mark. Of course, we talked about all of your parts in the proposal, so all of that, those are all things that we've marked that we feel are important for your parks. Keep going. And things we've noted that we think we need to do for your parks. Visit them all. Concept plans, not just for the parks, but also the buildings. And your 10-year capital plan. What's it really going to cost to develop all this stuff? Keep going, Mark. And then the programming and staffing. How do we add staff if we come up with new programs and facilities? And then your preliminary and final plan. And don't just take our word for it, if you would. That quote right there is something I'm really proud of. That mayor said that, we weren't necessarily the least expensive plan, but boy, what they got was bang for the buck for a plan that can actually be implemented. And we're real proud of that. New results, you asked us for, one of the questions you asked us was real-world results. Brookhaven's implementing a $40 million park bond off of our plan. And our scoring, I think we were proud. This was in y'all's agenda pack. Y'all's committee recognized that we were the top firm. Really, really proud of that as well. And in terms of the cost, y'all's RFP noted the budget as being $150,000. Our fee was in the lowest third of the total fees. So we tried to build as robust of a plan as possible, bringing in all the experts, giving this plan a fresh set of eyes. I think that's important for you guys. Bringing new trends in recreation, you guys mentioned that. We can talk to that for Q&A here in a moment. But I think what we offer is bang for the buck and a real world, real implementable plan for your citizens, not just parks, but also your recreation centers and programs.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander.
Start to you guys for questions.
Oh, Mr. Bond, did you want to say something?
No, I will say that I'm very excited to have the opportunity to continue working with you guys in Albany. You all have been great to work with, Ms. Subadan, Mr. Mayor, commissioners, everybody, Craig, and all of you that we've worked with previously. Look forward to continuing that. I will freely admit that I do not have the answer for every single question, but I think the strength that I bring to the team is that I've got a full team behind me. So if I don't have the question, somebody behind me will have it and we'll get you the answer.
Thank you, Ms. Bond. Questions? Commissioner Howard.
Just thanks for the presentation and look forward to work with y'all in the near future.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you for the presentation, and nothing further. Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher?
No questions. Thank you for your hard work.
Mr. Alexander or Mr. Bond, again, Commissioner Fletcher submitted the question and paraphrasing it. Obviously qualified to put together a master plan, but how can we be sure that it's going to be viable for the future? And I think primarily we're talking about can we afford it? Can we afford to build it? And do we know what the cost of operating and maintaining the facilities would be?
I'll speak to that, Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we showed you guys is that when it comes to the recommendation, we can put real-world numbers to it. When we give you guys a price tag for all of the conceptual plans, those are pretty reliable. It may be more than what you guys can afford, and that'll be in the draft plan, and then what we'll have to do is pare it back. Working with finance people, working with your budgeting staff in terms of, you know, how much of this can you really tackle at one time? How much do you want to put off to the future? What's your priorities? Kind of coming up with a prioritized capital plan. I think it's something we really specialize in. And what was the second part of your question there? I'm sorry.
Sir?
You mentioned the second part of the question there about.
Mr. Atkinson, I think the gist of the question is, A, what's it going to cost us to build it? And can we afford, we have to have some idea what it's going to cost to operate and maintain what we build. And in the past, I think we looked at whether we could buy the vehicle and not whether we could afford to get insurance and put gas in it. Because we go through the years and we have reduced our staff, our recreation department, and we added parks, and then we complain that what we have is not adequately maintained. That's not really fair to anybody. But
And you know, Mr. Mayor, I'll chime in on that. This is one example that we've got is that we did a master plan similar to this in Cobb County, and they used that plan as a checklist. They've taken the plan, they've adopted it, and they just worked down the list using it like we prepared it, and it has worked well for them. You can elaborate a little further on that if you want.
That's correct. You know, and we talked about for the maintenance and staffing aspects of this, you know, John Gentry being a former parks director. You know, if we recommend, let's say, renovation of some center, addition of some facility, you know, that means staff. That means y'all may have to, you know, look at operational costs for specialized staff for that program. So that'll be part of the talk, and that'll be part of the consideration. It's not just a SPLOST consideration, you know, one-time, you know, capital build-it type plan. It'll be a long-term maintenance consideration and a staffing consideration. That's where our friends that are former park and recreation directors, you know, we'll be working with Craig, of course, on that. But, you know, understanding the long-term cost of those is always part of our plan.
thank you, Mr. Alexander. Commissioner Warburton?
Yeah, one question, I think you kind of covered this a little bit in your presentation, but I'll ask you to elaborate. But how do you take your design experience across the country and just your knowledge and expertise and marry that with the needs of our community, the needs of our youth, and what our youth are asking for and wanting, and even senior adults? You know, what is your process of, you know, I saw, just to be facetious, you had a great design of a hockey ring. You know, obviously, awesome design, wouldn't work in Albany, you know. Sure. But that kind of example, how do you take what you're really good at and what we're wanting and asking for and marry the two together? So
what that does is our work all across the country, working for all the different clients, is we gather all the input, their ideas, and what it really does and how it helps you in your project here in Albany is that we've got a massive toolbox of ideas, creative things, and solutions that we can pull from to meet the needs that are specific to your community. You know, maybe what we've done somewhere is not the exact tool, but we're familiar with it and how it can work and modify it and create what you need to work here in Albany.
Yeah, getting real specific, I mean, we've developed skate parks across the country. This is just getting very anecdotal here. But, you know, a big tournament quality skate park may not be the thing that your youth there need. You know, the skill level of the skaters may not be that same level that we see somewhere else. So talking to your youth and finding out and probing is what helps guide the recommendations that we make for you guys. Now, we'll want to make it first class when we design it, but in terms of specifically addressing the skill levels and how your youth and seniors and everybody else operate in this department, we tailor that to what's working for you all there.
And you know, some of those processes, we applied that to the Driscoll Park Master Plan, and we barely scratched the surface with what we're capable of and how we can do that. But that, you know, it starts to bring it home a little little more local here for you to see how we work with that.
Okay, that's it, Mayor.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming this morning. My question is the same as I asked the last gentleman, is what is your experience in marrying what you do as a, what your experience is to health outcomes for communities and also marrying a wellness expectation that we as a board can look to see an improvement in our community's overall health?
Okay, I'll address that question. In terms of health, of course, obviously there's fitness, there's senior programs that can be developed for seniors, silver sneakers, other kind of programs that get people active. In terms of like almost kind of a spiritual health, if you would, this past year has taught everybody that parks are very important to just being able to get out and away and be somewhere where you're away from the troubles of the day. Parks were one of the few things that could remain open during the past year, and it's really brought to the forefront how important they are in terms of interaction with nature to help kind of nourish the spirit a little bit, get away from the stresses of the day. One thing in terms of kind of a mental health aspect that Parks and Recreation bring is an NRPA, one of their models is that they say that it's all about social equity. And when we develop parks, parks touch people from all demographics. They touch people from all backgrounds. They touch people from all ages. And it's one of the few investments a community can make that does touch to people's spirit and their overall mental wellness and their mental health and those things. I think that's something that's a national trend that's developing, and it's been brought to the forefront, put in focus over this past year. I think more and more communities are recognizing that, and I think there's more programming to be done about that. I don't think it's all been figured out yet. It's on the way. We've all been promoting this kind of thing for many years. We've all, as park professionals, we've recognized this, but boy, has it really come to the forefront in the media and the news in the past year. And I think that's going to continue. So I think we want to focus on that as part of the plan.
Okay, and my final question is, I guess, what can you all do locally to look at the local culture here as well as the demographics to kind of make your master plan fit what we see here on the ground in Albany?
Okay, when we start doing your community profile, of course, we're pretty familiar with the city, but, income levels, that means are there barriers to participation in programs for certain demographics? Do people need, should there be subsidized programs at certain levels? Usually, the free lunch marker is a lot of times is used as to when a household may need subsidy then to be involved in programs that require registration and fees and those kind of things. We'll be looking at that. One other thing we look at is car ownership, and that's very important when it comes to drive time and walk time to a green space or to a park. There's national standards that talk about how far you should be able to travel to a park of a certain type or to a facility of a certain type, and that may be different based on the percentage of car ownership and how many people have more than one car in the household. If parents at work with the car, well then how far of a walk do other family members have to get to a green space? And those things come into play when we're looking at demographics, so those may be important.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Alexander, Mr. Bond, we need a master plan. I mean, this morning we've talked about a pickleball court. There's a desire to have pickleball courts in Albany. Apparently, it's a very popular game. But the fact of the matter is, we don't have a master plan. Of course, any master plan we had, there was no such thing as pickleball. But the commission's about to consider design on a project. We don't have a master plan, and then we hear it might cost $400,000 to build the pickleball courts. Well, the skate park, that was not any recreation master plan. That was Albany Tomorrow came forward and said all these number of youth want a skate park. Well, I mean, it takes what limited funds we have away from improving what we have. And I mean, there's so many things we need to look at. The Flint River Golf Course, historically they said, well, it's going to be an enterprise fund, it's going to pay for itself. That's not going to happen. I don't think most municipal courts are fully self-sufficient, but we need to know what is the proper level because, I mean, one thing that most of our citizens, and particularly the members out at Flint River Golf Course, I don't think they fully comprehend when the budget for the golf course goes up and we don't increase fees. Our recreation programs in other areas are suffering as a result of that. So just in closing, any ideas? I mean, it's recreation is an opportunity, it's an obligation, in my opinion, of the city, but we have not fully leveraged it as an opportunity for at-risk youth, and that's what I want this master plan to provide for us. So.
Well, good, very good. That's specifically why we wanted to bring in Darrell. We've known him for a while through NRPA. He was very successful in Pasadena, getting at-risk youth off the street and into programs, and that was specific, something we pulled out of the RFP, and that's the reason we have him on the team.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Mr. Bond, anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
We appreciate you coming down.
All right. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a closing report. Ms. Subadan?
Good morning, Mayor. I am going to take my mask off, make it a little easier to speak. I'm going to cover the mic. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So I just lost my place. Where did it go? No. All right, why don't you, I can't find my notes all of a sudden. But go ahead and just roll the PowerPoint for me, and I will just go that way. All right, so today marks my last report in front of you officially. And I want to go ahead with the next slide. I want to take a few minutes. You know, we'll only be here 30, 35 minutes talking about how great my tenure was, you know, drink coffee, lay back, sit back, relax. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the highlights. We'll talk about the things you asked for in your closeout report. And then I just want to have a few closing remarks. But, you know, things always seem impossible until they're done. Next slide, please. And so some of our highlights, you know, I could not leave without talking about the thing that I took on the first when I came here, which was downtown redevelopment. And we did some work on HGI that, you know, hasn't quite turned out the way we thought it would, Hills and Garden Inn. But we were fortunate. The board supported us, and then we kind of rolled into, you know, a downtown redevelopment strategy that really in a relatively short period of time has given us some results. And so we have, you know, the past, which has been done. And then we have the future, things to look forward to, such as streetscaping, the boutique hotel, the transportation center, which was on the books for 20 years. You know, and now our celebrations downtown are robust. We have a lot of people coming down here during non-COVID times, and Front Street Market is developing. So I'm very proud of our progress downtown. You know, and I tell people, you know, I'll use some Sharonisms for this presentation. You can have anything, but you can't have everything. And so, you know, it's really good that we have come a long way and done a lot with our downtown. Next slide, please. And so, you know, community engagement is not one of those things that we think of on a regular basis. But as we embarked on this journey in 2016, we really reached out to our employees to say, who are we in the city of Albany? And so we did our rebranding with a new mission, a new vision, a new visual identity, which is now how people recognize us. And also, we were able to work with the board to develop a strategic plan. And in using that strategic plan, it guided us in our endeavors, in our budget priorities. And our partnerships is one of the things I'm really proud of. In my administration, I feel like we have created strong partnerships with the Boys and Girls Club, with Spectra, with the EDC, with the CVB, with CHIHA, and even especially with our business community. Next slide, please. And Albany Utilities. One of the things that has allowed us as a community to grow and really to support our government is the contribution of the Albany Utilities. And being able to have a unified structure with a stated transfer that comes to the city of Albany every year to support our general fund has allowed us to be able to continue to support operations, growing operations in the city of Albany. And especially we have in the pipeline the AMI project, which, you know, is not moving quite as fast as we would have liked it to, but it is certainly gaining ground. The last thing on that slide is our billing system and customer portal. We had to have that completed and stood up before AMI could move forward. The billing system is now up and running. Customers will probably wonder why they haven't received a bill. It did take us a week to transfer over from one system to another, and another week for us to get the bills out. So your bills are coming. We have not forgotten to bill you. And we will make arrangements to not penalize anybody who pays late because they got their bill late. That really was on us. Slightly unavoidable. It's a huge transition from an old arcane system to a new up-to-date billing and customer portal system. So we ask that you be patient with us. Streetlight conversion is one of those things that I am also very proud of. When I came here, we physically went out and counted and found thousands of streetlights out before the 2017 storms, and that only increased the problem. But I knew we had, when we finally got a agreed project to modernize our streetlights with no debt, I knew we made progress when I went to one of Commissioner Howard's East Albany meetings, and a man said to me, I can see the legs on the cricket as he walks across the street now. And so, and even better that the city is lit. When there's an outage problem, we know right away, so we can be proactive in making sure that gets done. Next slide, please. And everybody knows that I'm big on infrastructure, both what I call the vertical, the horizontal, and then what lies beneath. The things we never think about, the projects that are not cool and neat, but those are the projects that are so desperately needed for us as a community to thrive. And so our community, with our efforts of education, passed T-SPLOST, a huge milestone for Albany. Our first attempt at T-SPLOST failed. This last attempt passed through the community advocacy as well as through our education efforts. And I'm really pleased to say that now we have a 7-year fully funded street resurfacing project. The first 3 phases have been either complete or underway. They encompassed 177 streets, 65 miles of streets, 17 million committed through contract. And at the end of this, all of our streets that are rated very poor will be resurfaced. It will be my hope that you move into the next level after that with your next iteration of T-SPLOST, and you're able to keep this going. The initial years were funded by SPLOST 7. Future years will all be funded by T-SPLOST. And from the Albany Transit perspective, we've transitioned from a full fleet of diesel buses to a full fleet of compressed natural gas buses. And partnered, again, another partnership with the Albany State University to transport students between campuses, helping them to make their unification of the campuses successful in helping kids to get to class. Next slide, please. And then capital and infrastructure, some of our big highlights. As you can see, I'm not going to read them all, but these are some of the things where you all got to do groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings, and more importantly than that, our employees and our community ended up with better facilities that are more suitable for our current environment, as well as what will happen in the future with the general aviation hangar, which is the RFP is currently out for bid, and relocation of the Albany Wellness Clinic to the Pace Building, which is expected to be complete at the end of this month. And I told Don that even though I'm leaving, it's still got to be complete by the end of this month. Next slide, please. Again, other T-SPLOST, predominantly T-SPLOST and SPLOST projects, sidewalks, alleys, alley paving, crushed asphalt, more sidewalks, more alleys, the connector trail, which is complete, and signalization repairs from the hurricane complete, and signage, which continues to be a challenge, but we are working through that as well. Next slide. And of course, that which lies beneath. I am very proud of the work that we have done with our sewer stormwater system. You know, before we ever had, you know, a series of issues of lift stations failing, we were already on the way with the East and West Side Interceptor. That project is now complete. Huge improvement to our sewer system, preventing spills into the Flint River from those 2 60-inch pipes on both sides of the river. And then, of course, the EPD has mandated us to reduce our CSO, and you all have gratefully adopted the 10-year plan, and also in concept committed to our Recovery Act funding as sort of the down payment on that plan. And the funding has been presented to you. You know how this is going to be paid for. We have a very short, limited time in order to do that first 75% of separation, which we will exceed that in 5 years if the projects continue to move as planned. The other thing you may recall is there were some river station projects that we committed to the EPD that we would do. These are upgrades of pumps and lift stations, and those have been complete. And we also did an expansion of sewer in the Shadowlawn area where septic tanks were failing on individuals' properties, and we went in and ran sewer, and that was a SPLOST-funded project. Next, please. And these are some other other important sewer projects, and the East Broad Clark Avenue separation design is complete, and we're getting ready to go out to bid for those. Those are kind of in our year 1 of our 10-year plan. Next slide. And you know, it was interesting hearing Ron Huffman talk about the management and the maintenance of our parks, and I would beg to differ. I think that we have implemented a pretty reasonable plan for replacement. We put aside funding every year. It may not be everything we want it to be, but we certainly put aside funding every year through our R3M program for the purpose of repair, replacement, and renovation. Some of those things don't rise to the level of a capital replacement. Sometimes, you know, a building needs to be painted, carpet needs to be replaced, flooring, seats for the public. Those are the kinds of things that we have done through our R3M program, and every year we put funding into that program, you know, in order to make sure that we can maintain what we have. And so when I came here, I was impressed that SPLOST allowed us to do these large capital projects, but I was unimpressed that we had no way to maintain them. And so R3M was my way of starting a seed fund that allowed us to maintain what we already have. Next slide. And so this is a busy slide. I'm not going to read it all, but you know, there's so many small things that have been implemented that we wouldn't have the time here today to talk about, because one of my Sharonisms is 3 B's. You know, it's be bright, be brief, and and so I don't want to go through all these items, but I really believe we have shifted the culture of our organization. When I got here, we had no arm for informing the public. We had no public information office. We had no social media presence. Our Channel 16 was terrible. You know, you couldn't even listen to it or watch it. It was fuzzy, you couldn't hear it. And so I believe we've made considerable efforts, and kudos to the PIO staff and everybody who cooperates with them to really give the community input and allow them to hear from us so that they're not in the dark as to what is going on. And as I said before, we've formulated really strong partnerships, and the things that you don't see are the automation of processes. Things that used to be done with, you know, 16 pieces of paper. You know, some people like to put things in the mail, send them to Tallahassee, have them come back to us, you know, in order for us to do anything with them. But for the rest of us, we like automation. It helps us to be more accountable for when a process is started to when a process is ended. Everything from agenda processing to purchasing to work orders to the hiring process, we have automated those things so we have a good sense of where processes are at any given time and who's approved, who hasn't approved, and where we are in that process. So these are some of the things that happen behind the scenes. And then as part of that, we have given employees the training, tools, and equipment needed to do their jobs. Before I got here, we did not have a replacement program for equipment. We sort of made it the last thing. If we had a couple thousand or a couple $1 million left, we would buy equipment. Well, that's really not a way to maintain your fleet. So we have actively put a fleet replacement program in place. Some of that we're catching up because we hadn't had equipment replaced for a long time. And we're also modernizing and moving toward cleaner vehicles. That's a little more expensive, but certainly the return on our investment, we believe, is going to be significant. And we will be looking to see what comes out on the horizon as it relates to electric vehicles. Next, please. And so, again, one of the things that I am extraordinarily proud of is the financial shape that I leave you in. I feel very confident that I am leaving you better than you were when I got here. We have not had to increase the millage rate, unlike our partners on the county side. That was some shade, by the way. And our draft millage rate, our draft budget for 2023 also does not include an increase in the millage. But that certainly will be up to you as you consider the budget. We stopped budgeting for MEAG credits when I got here, and have been able to put aside the tail end of the MEAG credits, which were a lot less than they were in the beginning. And we've used some of that for the streetlight program, and we've also committed some of that for the weatherization loan program. But how you use that going forward will certainly be up to you. The fund balance, since I've been here, combined fund balance has increased by 67%. And I'm very proud of that because I believe that it puts the city in a position to be prepared for any disasters and also gives you some flexibility and opportunity to do some of the things that you want to do going forward. I'm also really grateful for our finance staff and for the fact that we have had so many audits since I've been here, and really all with a clean audit opinion, multiple consecutive years. Next. The other thing that I'm sure you're aware, but I think it bears repeating, is how much we have gained in grant dollars since we kind of entered into the competitive grant cycle. It is true that CARES Act is kind of added into this number, but 31 million in grants, and we're expecting that's going to increase to 38 million this year because of the Recovery Act. But our ability to compete for competitive grants and be successful has been extraordinary. And that's bringing dollars into our community for things that we otherwise would not have been able to do. And so the one thing I would say is, make sure that we continue to manage that in the way it's intended. Grant dollars are a two-edged sword. The federal government likes to give, but they also like to receive. And so if we do it improperly, we'll have to pay money back. So I would really caution you to make sure that we use the grant dollars in the way that they have, the way they are intended. And of course, because of this growth in our fund balance, the net worth of the city and the utility have increased significantly in the time I've been here. Next, please. The other thing that sometimes is a concern is our defined benefit pension program. This is a challenge all across the country for places that have a defined benefit program. It was interesting. I'm not a voting member of the pension board, not a member of the pension board, but of course I listen in on the meetings, and when there's a pension increase necessary, the chair of the pension board certainly lets me know that, and we've had 2 increases since I've been here, increasing our city contributions to 12% for general employees and 15% for public safety in order for us to really shore up the pension program more so than it has been. But, in our history, and I said this on the pension board meeting, but I'm going to say it again, policy decisions have consequences. And back in 1981, the pension plan was in extremely good shape. It more than doubled and tripled what was necessary to meet its liability. And some geniuses at that time thought better of it, and they refunded all employee contributions that had been made to the pension plan. And worse than that, for over 20 years, they did not require employees to participate in the pension plan through a contribution. And what that did is really put us in a position where the pension plan has significant unfunded liability. I'm pleased to say that even though we do have an unfunded liability, like many pension plans all across the country, we have been able to reduce that in the last 4 years, and it is within the state guidelines. And so, I do want to say that employees need not worry. The pension plan is in good shape, but it does have to be monitored carefully to make sure we don't grow that unfunded liability. Next slide. And this shows you, some of our beginning balances, the contributions of the city and the employees, and you can see our investment income is really what is helping our pension plan to continue to be solvent. And it's important, again, policy decisions have consequences. It's important that we make sure that we make the right investment decisions. And certainly the company that we have been using has been really good for the city and helped us with our return on investment. Next slide. Keep going. That's just a summary of some of the grants that we've received. Next slide. Next slide, please. And so one of the things you asked for in your closeout request was the status of our current year. And so going into the budget last year this time, we were in the midst of COVID. We really had no good way to look into the crystal ball and determine what to expect. So we budgeted a reduction in revenue of 15% on sales tax, which would be SPLOST, LOST, and T-SPLOST. We have been blessed, and I will tell you, we are expected that to be less than 1%. So that puts us in a really good position with our SPLOST and T-SPLOST projects. On the flip side of that, hotel motel is trending 14% less than fiscal year 2020, but it is pretty much in line with what we expected. We expected that there was going to be a loss there, and it's slow to recover. Although there really is a lot of optimism that there will be some pent-up demand after the pandemic, and hotel motel will come back really strong. There are no expenditures of any consequences in any budget expected to exceed the budget. And there have been some budget amendments that have been done. For example, for the supermarket, a budget amendment was done. And so obviously that accounts for any increases in areas that were not originally budgeted. But the CSO funding plan, which we talked about, will be available to you. You will actually vote on that after it comes to the utility board, just to codify that for the record. And obviously there will be a footnote on that that says, you know, if other funding, other federal funding becomes available, you can modify the plan. That's totally within your, you know, your policymaking, realm and authority. But I think it's important to give staff kind of a vote that says, yes, this is the plan, and then we will go ahead and move forward with implementing. And we are moving actively on the projects. And interestingly enough, the last outstanding sewer bond for the project 20 years ago will be made in July of 2021, just in time for us to kind of rinse and repeat, start over. The third quarter financials that you requested will be provided this week, and it is in the form of your monthly financial reports that come to you with the key performance indicators. So you can expect to see that when you check your email later this week. And as I said, all budgets are really, everybody is trending under budget. And so our revenues exceed our expenditure. We are ending the year in a really good shape and ready for the next fiscal. Next slide, please. I couldn't end this without talking about the COVID response. In addition to everything else that we have continued to move forward, you know, there were some real highlights about our COVID response. As you know, many press conferences that we prepare for, task force meetings and Zoom calls, we have tested, we do consolidated testing report for the community. As of March, you see that 99,000 people, you know, or tests have been conducted in the community since March of 2020. Mask Up Albany, we started as a grassroots effort, and now is just sort of kind of what we do. And the reimagining of how we do government. You know, people working remotely, these meetings being broadcast remotely, we really quickly had to spin up getting the audiovisual in this room ready for streaming. And now we stream on 3 platforms with very little hiccups. So, you know, a lot has been done in response. Next slide. And of course, we entered into antibody testing, and some of you may or may not know that we monitor our wastewater. We do biweekly testing of the wastewater to determine the amounts of COVID in our system, and it's so interesting. It follows the exact path of the positive results. It's just really interesting information. And of course, we use some of our CARES Act dollars to support our small business. We provided utility relief. We've provided eviction prevention and utility assistance for individuals as well. Next slide. And here most recently, now we are all things vaccine, you know, encouraging and promoting the COVID-19 vaccine. It is suggested that there will be a 4th phase or a 4th wave. And so I highly encourage that you roll up your sleeves. If you haven't done it yet, get your vaccine. I've gotten mine. I'm happy to say I've gotten my 2nd shot, and my arm didn't drop off. It's still here. And so I encourage you to participate. And we're also, we've created some PSAs with trusted faces, the mayor and the chairman, and we've been pushing that out to our local media both for public service spots, but we've also paid for some spots to get that word out, trying to encourage people to get the vaccine. Next slide, please. Advancements in police. The inclusion of the community services officer as a force multiplier has gone over really well. I think the chief wants to continue to expand that program for non-sworn activities. It certainly helps as a force multiplier. Thanks to this board and supporting our budget efforts for this year, integrated video systems, otherwise known as body cams, have now been deployed for all of our officers. Red Zone, which is the school zone traffic enforcement cameras, have been approved and installed. We're not actually sending notices out yet. They want to wait till the fall school year for that, and they'll be testing. And automated license plate recognition cameras are also on every vehicle. And we're putting the ticket printers, in fact, I think all of the ticket printers are now in cars for e-citations. Again, helping us to be more efficient, reduce paper. I'm proud to say that the department got their second CALEA recertification, and this is a number that you all kind of need to have, in your back pocket when you go out to the community and say, you all just need to hire more cops. Well, 172 officers hired since 2015, 48 since January of 2020. It's not for the lack of trying on our behalf, but retention is challenging for many, many reasons. And the public safety study is underway. I'm really interested, even though I won't be here, to see what we can do to better help with retention. And I really feel very strongly that our police department does a great job in building credibility with our community. And our police department reflects the city of Albany as a whole. Next slide, please. And Project Safe Neighborhoods, those of you who don't know about it, these are the partnerships, again, partnerships that we have in order to, what I tell the chief is lock up the bad guys. Next slide, please. Again, something I'm proud of is our emphasis on green energy. And Mayor, you'll be happy to know that the vehicle charging station is almost there. Almost there. We got 2 that are ready to go, 1 that's almost finished, and we certainly will make sure that you have the opportunity to do the ribbon cutting on that, as that was your initiative. And I don't want to overlook brownfield grants. That's one area that is sort of below the surface, kind of one of those small things. But hundreds of thousands of dollars have come into our community to clean up previously contaminated sites, and giving us the opportunity to redevelop those sites in the future. The Albany Museum of Art, I forgot to mention that on my downtown slide. That's coming in the future. That's a brownfield site. The grant will certainly help to clean up that property and bring a valued asset in the Albany Museum of Art downtown. Next slide. And one of my favorite initiatives, Operation Clean Sweep. It's where we go out and we do what I call, spring cleaning in each ward. And you can see, next slide, please, how much we have done. We're keeping metrics. We're keeping kind of a running total of what we've done through this process, and helping to improve really citizen pride in their own neighborhoods. And what we're hoping is that we'll come in and clean and they'll keep it going. And if we do this enough, hopefully it will improve the neighborhoods, improve the neighborhood pride. And I can't say enough about the team from every department that really descends on Operation Clean Sweep in, 1 or couple days, and does a phenomenal job of helping to remove blight and improve our community. Next slide. And quality of life, the demolitions, you have funded it. We have continued to push that boulder uphill. Lots of challenges there, but I'm also really glad to see a commitment to Parks and Rec, and the Driscoll Park has been approved. This board and our staff really wrap themselves around the census to try to get people to respond to the census. That information is going to be vitally important to us when those census results come out and they start to look at redistricting, reapportionment of funding, how CDBG how CDBG dollars get allocated. So kudos to the staff and the community for their participation in the census. And one of the things that, you know, I really was concerned that I wouldn't be able to bring you a solution is the grocery store in South Albany. It is one of those things where, you know, the stars aligned, God opened the door, and, you know, we were prepared, and we were able to bring that initiative across the line with your support. And as I shared earlier, the weatherization loan program is now up and running for those who qualify. Next slide, please. And, you know, sometimes people don't really know how much we support our community through the Department of Community and Economic Development with all of these types of activities. You know, sometimes we partner with others to provide, and so they don't know that the city is really behind these programs. Everything from rental assistance to homeless programming, to assistance to small business, to loans to small business, assistance to individuals who are below the poverty line with rehabilitating their homes. And the city has several hundred rental properties that we also maintain and provide at low rental costs for our community. And we do a considerable amount of utility assistance annually. Next slide, please. And this is also one of my favorite programs. Not everybody agrees with this, but, you know, for no cost, for support only, and sometimes we also do some infrastructure, we are able to get low-income tax credit properties opening in our community. And right now, either fully leased or in process, we have 388 brand new, really livable units happening all over our city. And that's partly because of our support, because we are a GIT community, and also because of the advocacy that we have had at the state level. And I would hope that you're able to continue with that, because this allows for decent, new, and affordable housing in our community, which goes back to that early comment we had in this meeting, which feels like it was like 2 days ago. But, you know, you heard the complaint and the suffering of the individual living in substandard housing. Well, low-income tax credits is a way to hold people accountable and make sure that they are in safe, affordable, and decent housing. Next. And so your task force initiatives were very bold in October when we did our last, our fall retreat. But I think that as a commission, you've been very successful in moving these initiatives forward. As a staff, we came alongside you and really helped you to have tangible outcomes from your task force initiatives. So I'm very proud of the staff that worked closely with you in order to bring some of your ideas to the finish line. Next slide, please. And so, Team Albany. None of this would be possible without the team. And so, you know, since July of 2015, we have tried to make sure that employees are well compensated in our organization in order to help retention, in order to show them that we appreciate the work they do and that they are valued members of our team. And so across the board, an average of 20% pay increase. We established a 457B plan, a matching plan where the city does a percentage, which helps employees to, and it kind of builds on top of that defined benefit, because I think it's important for the city of Albany to have a rich and robust program of benefits to help us to retain the brightest and the best. And so 66% of our employees participate, meaning they put their own money in order to have the retirement savings in the 457B. We have had no increase in health insurance premiums for Albany for 8 years. And we are expecting that that will continue in the next fiscal year. And we're not programming an increase in our fiscal year budget. Recently, we continuously do training of our employees, and even though we're in this COVID environment, we recently did first-line training of our supervisory personnel through, you know, a remote online version of that training. But, you know, it's really important that we continue to develop staff and make sure that they are continuing to grow professionionally so that they're able to give back to the city in even greater way. And you know, we've moved from being the community that needs assistance with mutual aid to be the city that gives assistance to mutual aid. So that's very gratifying that our light department is so advanced now that they are able to provide mutual aid when, you know, most recently Noonan got hit with a disaster. We're able to step up and be part of that response. And they do reimburse us for that, but it's just really nice to know that we have that capacity. Next slide, please. And so you asked for department closeout reports. I'm not going to go through every department closeout report because that would violate the 3 Bs. And so what will happen after this is by the end of this week, you will get a printed report. And in the printed report, it will have the closeout for every single department. And it will tell you if there's anything pending, grant deadlines, report deadlines, anything that is critical. I will tell you nothing is on fire. You can sleep well at night. Even though Chief Scott's people have SCBAs, nothing is on fire. Departments are accountable. They know what their deadlines are. Stephen Carter is aware of what their deadlines are. We function very much as a matrixed organization. In our executive team meetings, we cross-pollinate to make sure that no one person holds all the information, including me. So when I leave in 10 days, there will be no surprises. You will have the information you need. Department heads are fully aware of what their responsibilities are, and in the closeout physical written report, you will have all the information that you need. Next slide, please. And so my last words, as policymakers, I ask that you choose wisely with the future in mind. Recognize the value of the team, particularly the leadership. You know, I've heard and seen what I think are demoralizing comments and decisions made towards the leadership. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers will tell you experience and leadership matters. And so I ask that you value the whole team and don't exclude certain people in the team because of your own personal bias. It doesn't do the city any good. And staff, continue to do the right things, to do the right things right. Keep up a high standard of uncompromising excellence. And so I thank you for the opportunity to serve, and I am subject to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Subadan. Commissioner Howard, any questions for the city manager?
No question, but just thank you for the years that you served the city, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions, just thank you so much for all that you've done for the city of Albany. You'll certainly be missed, and best of luck in all that you do in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Well, Sharon, I'd just really like to thank you for serving this community, serving this commission, and in many ways making me a better commissioner. You will be missed, and I truly believe that. Thank you, Sharon, for all of your almost 6 years.
Thank you.
Commissioner Warrington?
Thank you, Sharon. Great presentation. Certainly not much left to be said after all the accomplishment that was put out there. So I appreciate that and appreciate your service, and good luck in your new endeavors.
Thank you.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No questions. Sharon, thank you for all you've done, and best of luck down the road.
Thanks.
Commissioner Young?
No questions. Thank you for everything you've done for the city of Albany.
Thank you.
Superintendent, properly commended for those achievements during your almost 6 years here in Albany. I would like to ask you, though, It's been off the radar for some time. There was one, slide, the city spent, I think, $36 million in response to the 4 disasters.
Yes, sir.
And
I did skip
what
over
you had, we've been reimbursed for 23 million, but we're still owed 8 million.
Right, and I think, and Derek can correct me, I think we've been obligated another 4.5. So but we haven't actually gotten the check. So what we reported is what we've actually received, but they have obligated, meaning they have written to us saying, you're gonna get a check for 4.5 million, and the state is also gonna add some funding to that. And so we expect to get 31 million. Of course, you know, there's a percentage of that that we have to fund.
The 4.5 million that's been allocated or committed, as you say, is that included in your computation of the reserve?
No, not until we get it.
Okay, and so not until we got the check in the bank do you include that?
Right. When we present the financials,
Okay.
we would not include that until we actually receive it.
So Mr. Brown or someone in his department would be best suited to help us sort of monitor where those funds are and when we might expect them.
Sure, and actually, risk management took the lead in really making sure that all of our I's were dotted and T's were crossed in filing with FEMA. So they also keep a really close track on that. And of course, Derek is on the financial end with the receiving and booking it back to the fund that it came from. So if it came from stormwater, it came from the light department, when the reimbursement comes, the reimbursement goes back to the fund that it came from.
Thank you, Ms. Subin.
I'd like to just thank everybody, especially staff, for supporting me all these years, and I wish you Godspeed.
Opportunity to present items for future agenda or other matters. Commissioner Howard.
Ms. Subban, if you can pass this on to Mr. Carr. Looking at some old note that I think we need to do an agreement with the boys and Gillard. That.
I'll check on the status.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Nothing further at this time.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Nothing else.
Commissioner Warmington.
No new items.
Commissioner Langstaff.
Nothing further.
Commissioner Young.
Yeah, I just wanted to let staff know that the presentation from the Food Justice Coalition that was planned for the next work session. We're going to move that back to May, but I'll get back to them with some other information concerning that. That's it.
I just had 2 issues, Mr. Superintendent. First, what is the status of Driscoll Park? Have we put that out for bid or?
We actually have an estimate on engineering that's going to be coming to you next meeting, and you can decide if you're going to go with that or if you want to bid the engineering part of the design and engineering part of that. So that's going to be on the next agenda.
Okay, so the proposal would be to separate the engineering from the construction.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, not considered it. We're not planning on a design bid.
Okay, with the, what we call engineering, is that really like architectural?
Yes.
So, okay, what we're talking about is getting an architect to design it and then we put it out for bid.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And secondly, what do we need to do to have somebody look at Carver Gym and tell us what it would cost to fix that gym?
I mean, really, if that's a request, a priority, we can hire somebody to give us an evaluation. Probably somebody who does environmental evaluations because of the mold issue in there.
Okay, could we just put that on the agenda, because I certainly don't have the authority to commission an assessment, but I think that would be the responsible thing to do it at this point. There being no further business to come before the commission, today's meeting is adjourned. Thank